One day, your life will end. And in that final moment, nobody's approval will matter anymore. The opinions you feared, the people you tried so hard to impress, the pressure to always be accepted, none of it will matter. The only thing that will matter is whether you truly lived as yourself or spent your entire life pretending to be someone others wanted you to become. Most people are not physically trapped. They are mentally trapped. Trapped by fear of judgment. Trapped by guilt. Trapped by the need to constantly make everyone happy while silently destroying themselves inside. Buddhism teaches that attachment to other people's opinions creates endless suffering because your peace becomes controlled by things you can never fully control. The sad truth is that many people lose their entire identity trying to avoid disappointing others. They forget their dreams, ignore their emotions, and slowly disconnect from themselves. So in this video, you will learn how to stop losing yourself trying to please others and finally start living your life for yourself before it is too late. 1. Stop living for other people's approval. Most people make decisions based on what others will think about them. They are afraid of judgment, criticism, rejection, and disappointment. So instead of following their own path, they spend their life trying to satisfy everyone around them. They stay quiet to avoid conflict, say yes when they want to say no, and slowly hide their real personality just to be accepted. Buddhism teaches that attachment to approval creates suffering. The moment your happiness depends on other people liking you, your peace becomes unstable. One compliment makes you feel valuable, but one negative opinion suddenly destroys your confidence and ruins your mood. This is why many people feel emotionally exhausted all the time, because they are constantly worrying about how others see them. But the truth is simple. You cannot make everyone happy. No matter how kind, caring, or respectful you are, some people will still judge you, misunderstand you, or dislike you. That is part of life. So do not waste your entire life trying to prove your worth to people who will never fully understand you. Real peace begins when you stop chasing validation from others and start accepting yourself as you truly are. 2. Not everyone will understand you. As you grow, heal, and change, some people will stop understanding you. The version of you that always stayed quiet, sacrificed yourself, and tried to please everyone slowly begins to disappear. And the moment you start protecting your peace, setting boundaries, or thinking differently, some people may become uncomfortable with the new you. Buddhism teaches that people only understand life from their own level of awareness. Some people cannot understand your healing because they are still emotionally attached to old habits, old thinking, or old versions of you. That is why trying to make everyone understand your journey only creates more frustration and emotional pain. Many people spend their whole life explaining themselves because they are afraid of being misunderstood. But the truth is, not everyone is meant to fully understand your path. Some people will judge your decisions without knowing your struggles, your pain, or your inner battles. And that is okay. You do not need everyone's approval to grow. You do not need permission to choose peace over pressure. Sometimes the people who become upset with your growth were only comfortable with the version of you that ignored its own needs to make others happy. Real peace begins when you stop trying to make everybody understand you and start understanding yourself instead. 3. Stop carrying everyone's expectations. Many people are mentally exhausted not because life is impossible, but because they are carrying too many expectations that were never truly theirs. From a young age, people are told who they should become, how they should live, what success should look like, and how others expect them to behave. Slowly, without realizing it, they begin building their entire life around keeping other people satisfied instead of listening to themselves. Some people choose careers they do not even enjoy, just to make their family proud. Some stay in unhealthy relationships because they are afraid of disappointing others. Some hide their real personality because they fear rejection. And many people spend years pretending to be happy while internally feeling lost, empty, and emotionally disconnected from themselves. Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when you become attached to external expectations instead of inner truth. The more you live for society's approval, the more disconnected you become from your own peace. Your mind becomes filled with pressure, fear, comparison, and constant anxiety because deep inside, you know you are not truly living your own life. This is why so many people feel emotionally heavy all the time. They wake up stressed, overthink everything, and constantly worry about whether they are doing enough for everyone else. They feel like they must always prove themselves, succeed faster, look better, act perfectly, and meet every expectation placed upon them. But no matter how much they achieve, the pressure never ends because they are chasing acceptance instead of inner peace. The truth is, you cannot spend your entire life carrying everybody's expectations without eventually losing yourself. When your whole identity becomes based on pleasing others, your happiness becomes fragile. You stop asking yourself what truly makes you feel alive and start asking what will make other people approve of you. But Buddhism reminds us that peace does not come from living according to everyone else's standards. Peace comes from understanding yourself deeply and letting go of the pressure to constantly perform for the world. You were not born to become a prisoner of expectations. You were not born to spend your entire life trying to fit perfectly into roles that destroy your happiness. Life becomes lighter the moment you stop carrying pressure that does not belong to you. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is finally admit to yourself that you are tired of living only for other people's approval. 4. Protect your peace. Many people destroy their inner peace trying to keep everybody else comfortable. They stay silent when something hurts them. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid of conflict. They constantly explain themselves, overgive, and emotionally exhaust themselves just to avoid disappointing others. Slowly, they begin carrying stress, frustration, and emotional pain every single day while pretending everything is fine on the outside. Buddhism teaches that peace cannot exist where self-betrayal continues. Every time you ignore your own needs just to gain approval from others, you slowly lose connection with yourself. You may keep people happy temporarily, but deep inside, your mind becomes tired because your soul knows you are abandoning your own peace. Many people think protecting their peace is selfish. They feel guilty for saying no. They feel guilty for creating boundaries. They feel guilty for taking distance from people who constantly drain their energy. So instead of protecting themselves, they continue sacrificing their mental health to maintain relationships, conversations, and situations that slowly destroy their happiness. But Buddhism teaches that not every person deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not every argument deserves your attention. Not every opinion deserves space inside your mind. Some people bring constant negativity, drama, judgment, and emotional chaos wherever they go. And if you continue allowing those people to disturb your inner peace, your life will eventually become emotionally heavy and mentally exhausting. A peaceful mind is one of the most valuable things a person can have, because when your mind is peaceful, you think clearly, make better decisions, sleep better, and experience life more deeply. But when your mind is constantly filled with stress, emotional pressure, and unnecessary conflict, even beautiful moments begin to feel empty. This is why Buddhism teaches the importance of detachment and awareness. You must learn to observe what destroys your peace instead of constantly tolerating it. Sometimes the problem is not life itself. Sometimes the problem is the people, habits, and emotional attachments you continue allowing into your mind every day. Protecting your peace does not mean becoming cold or heartless. It simply means respecting your mental and emotional well-being enough to stop allowing everything to disturb your soul. It means learning when to walk away from unnecessary conflict. It means understanding that silence is sometimes more powerful than explanation. And it means realizing that your peace is more valuable than temporary approval from people who do not truly care about your well-being. Many people spend their entire life trying to fix everyone around them while completely neglecting themselves. They become emotionally available for everyone else, but never take time to heal their own mind. Eventually, this creates deep exhaustion because the human soul cannot survive peacefully while constantly carrying emotional burdens that were never meant to belong to it. The truth is, you cannot live a peaceful life while constantly surrounded by chaos that you refuse to let go of. Some people will misunderstand your boundaries. Some people will become upset when you stop tolerating disrespect. Some people will call you distant simply because you no longer allow them to control your emotions. But protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. The moment you stop trying to keep everyone happy and finally start protecting your own energy, your life begins to change. Your mind becomes calmer, your emotions become more stable, and for the first time in a long time, you begin to feel emotionally free again. 5. Life is too short to keep losing yourself. One day your life will end. One day, everything you worried about so deeply will no longer matter. The opinions of strangers, the pressure to impress everyone, the fear of judgment, and the constant need for approval will all disappear. And in that final moment, the only thing that will truly matter is whether you honestly lived your life or spent most of it pretending to be someone else for other people. Buddhism constantly reminds us that life is temporary, fragile, and uncertain. Nothing lasts forever. Every person, every moment, and every stage of life eventually passes away. Yet most people live as if they have unlimited time. They postpone happiness. They delay peace. They ignore their dreams. They continue sacrificing their own needs while telling themselves they will finally live for themselves someday in the future. But someday is never guaranteed. Many people spend years trapped in routines that slowly destroy their spirit. They wake up every morning emotionally tired, mentally stressed, and disconnected from themselves. Because their entire life revolves around pleasing others. They become so focused on meeting expectations that they forget to ask themselves one important question: am I truly happy living this way? And for many people, the honest answer is no. Deep inside, they feel lost. They feel emotionally empty because they abandoned their real personality a long time ago just to fit into the expectations of society, family, relationships, or the world around them. They learned how to become acceptable to others, but forgot how to become connected to themselves. Buddhism teaches that attachment to approval creates suffering because your peace becomes dependent on something you can never fully control. No matter how much you sacrifice yourself, some people will still criticize you. Some people will still misunderstand you. Some people will still expect more from you. That is why chasing approval becomes an endless emotional prison. And the saddest part is that many people do not realize this until years have already passed. One day they suddenly notice how much life has disappeared. They realize they spent more time worrying than living, more time overthinking than experiencing peace, more time trying to make everybody happy than understanding themselves, and slowly, regret begins to grow inside them, not because they failed others, but because they failed themselves. Life is too short to spend every day emotionally exhausted from trying to become enough for everyone around you. Life is too short to constantly hide your true feelings, suppress your dreams, and ignore your inner voice just to avoid judgment from people who are not even living your life. You only get one life, one chance to experience this world, one chance to grow, heal, love, explore, and become the person your soul truly wants to become. And if you spend that entire life trying to gain acceptance from everybody else, you may one day reach the end of your journey without ever truly knowing yourself. That is why Buddhism teaches the importance of awareness and presence. You must wake up before life passes you by. You must stop living on autopilot. You must stop sacrificing your peace for temporary approval, because time is something you can never get back once it disappears. Many people wait for the perfect moment to finally start living honestly. They wait for permission. They wait for acceptance. They wait for everyone around them to finally understand them. But life does not wait forever. The truth is, nobody can live your life except you. Nobody can feel your inner pain, your hidden dreams, your emotional exhaustion, or the quiet sadness of constantly abandoning yourself. And that is why you must eventually choose yourself. Not in a selfish way, but in a peaceful and honest way. Choose to live authentically. Choose to protect your peace. Choose to stop shrinking yourself just to make other people comfortable. Because one day your life will end. And before that day comes, make sure you truly lived as yourself instead of becoming a prisoner of everyone else's expectations. 6. Learn to disappoint people. One of the hardest things for most people to do is disappoint others. The moment someone becomes upset with them, they immediately feel guilty. They begin overthinking everything. They start questioning themselves. They try to fix the situation, explain themselves, apologize repeatedly, or sacrifice their own needs just to make the other person comfortable again. And after years of doing this, many people completely lose themselves. They become emotionally exhausted because their entire life revolves around managing other people's feelings. They constantly worry about upsetting family, disappointing friends, losing relationships, or being judged for choosing themselves. So instead of living honestly, they spend their entire life emotionally trapped by the expectations of everyone around them. Buddhism teaches that attachment is one of the greatest causes of suffering, and one powerful form of attachment is the need to keep everybody happy all the time. The problem is not kindness itself. Kindness is beautiful. Compassion is important. But when kindness turns into self-destruction, emotional exhaustion, and constant self-sacrifice, it stops becoming healthy. Many people were taught from childhood that saying no is selfish. They were taught to always prioritize everybody else first, to stay quiet to avoid conflict, to tolerate disrespect to keep peace, to constantly give, help, and sacrifice themselves even when their own mental health is falling apart. Over time, this creates a person who feels responsible for everybody's emotions, except their own. They become afraid of disappointing anyone because they fear rejection, abandonment, criticism, or losing love. So they continue saying yes when their soul is screaming no. They continue showing up for people who never emotionally show up for them. They continue carrying relationships, conversations, responsibilities, and emotional burdens that are slowly draining their spirit. And eventually, their mind becomes tired, very tired. Because no human being can spend their whole life abandoning themselves without eventually feeling empty inside. This is why so many people secretly feel trapped. On the outside, they look kind, helpful, understanding, and emotionally available for everyone. But internally, they feel suffocated because they never learned how to choose themselves without guilt. Buddhism teaches that peace begins when attachment begins to loosen, and sometimes you must detach yourself from the unhealthy belief that everybody must always be happy with your choices. The truth is simple but painful. No matter how good you are, somebody will eventually become disappointed with you. You can spend years helping people, sacrificing for people, loving people and supporting people, and one day, the moment you finally choose yourself, some of those same people may suddenly call you selfish. Not because you became cruel, but because they were comfortable benefiting from your self-neglect. This is something many people do not realize. Some relationships only survive because one person constantly sacrifices their peace to maintain them. The moment boundaries appear, the relationship changes. The moment you stop over-giving, over-explaining, and emotionally overextending yourself, some people become uncomfortable because they were attached to the version of you that never prioritized itself. But Buddhism teaches awareness. And awareness means recognizing when your kindness is being used against your own well-being. There is a difference between being compassionate and abandoning yourself. There is a difference between helping people and destroying your mental health, trying to save everyone around you. There is a difference between love and emotional slavery. Many people become prisoners of guilt. They feel guilty for resting, guilty for saying no, guilty for needing space, guilty for protecting their peace, guilty for walking away from toxic situations, guilty for choosing their own happiness. But why? Why should a human being feel guilty for protecting their own mind? Why should you feel guilty for refusing to continue carrying emotional pain that is destroying your spirit? Buddhism reminds us that inner peace matters deeply. A peaceful mind is not something small. It affects every part of your life. When your mind is constantly stressed, emotionally pressured, and mentally exhausted from trying to satisfy everybody, life itself begins to feel heavy. You stop enjoying simple moments. You stop feeling emotionally alive. Even when you smile, your soul feels tired. And one of the biggest reasons this happens is because many people are living lives that do not belong to them anymore. Their decisions are controlled by fear of disappointing others instead of truth. They ask themselves, what will people think? Will they get upset? Will they leave me? Will they judge me? But very few people stop and ask, what is this doing to my mental health? What is this doing to my peace? What is this doing to my soul? This is why learning to disappoint people is such an important part of emotional freedom. It does not mean becoming heartless. It does not mean intentionally hurting others. It simply means accepting the reality that you cannot build a peaceful life while constantly betraying yourself to keep everybody else comfortable. Some people will not like your boundaries. Some people will not like your honesty. Some people will become upset when you stop allowing them to emotionally control you. And that is okay. Not everybody is meant to stay comfortable with your growth. Sometimes your healing disappoints people who benefited from your pain. Sometimes your peace disappoints people who were used to your emotional availability. Sometimes your boundaries disappoint people who only liked you when you had none. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to approval creates suffering. The moment your happiness depends on everybody accepting your choices, you lose your freedom. Your life becomes controlled by fear instead of awareness. And fear creates emotional imprisonment. Many people never become who they truly are because they are too afraid of disappointing someone else. They stay in relationships that drain them. They continue careers that destroy their happiness. They keep pretending to be someone they are not because they fear judgment from family, society, or the world around them. But eventually, something inside begins to break. Because the soul becomes tired of living dishonestly. The soul becomes tired of constantly shrinking itself for the comfort of others. The soul becomes tired of carrying emotional weight that was never meant to belong to it. And one day, many people suddenly realize they spent years trying to make everyone else happy while completely neglecting themselves. That realization is painful, because time cannot be recovered. This is why Buddhism constantly reminds us about awareness and impermanence. Life is temporary. Your time is limited. Your energy is limited. Your emotional strength is limited. So you must become careful about where your peace is being sacrificed. Not every relationship deserves unlimited access to your energy. Not every opinion deserves space inside your mind. Not every disappointment is your responsibility to fix. Sometimes people will misunderstand you simply because you finally stopped abandoning yourself. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is allow people to be disappointed instead of continuously destroying your own mental health, trying to avoid conflict. Real peace begins when you stop needing everybody to approve of your existence. Real peace begins when you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. Real peace begins when you understand that protecting your soul is more important than temporary approval. And one of the most powerful moments in life is when you finally realize this. You are not responsible for sacrificing your peace just to keep everybody else comfortable. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to walk away from what destroys your spirit. You are allowed to disappoint people if it means finally being honest with yourself. Because at the end of the day, your life belongs to you. And if you spend your entire life trying to avoid disappointing everyone else, you may eventually disappoint the most important person of all, yourself. 7. Live authentically before life ends. One day, your life will come to an end. Your body will grow weak. Your time will slowly disappear, and everything you once worried about so deeply will no longer matter. The opinions of strangers will not matter. The pressure to impress people will not matter. The fear of judgment will not matter. And in that final moment, one painful question may suddenly appear inside your mind. Did I truly live as myself? This is one of the deepest lessons Buddhism tries to teach us. Life is temporary. Nothing here lasts forever. Every person, every moment, every emotion, and every stage of life eventually fades away. Yet most people spend their entire existence pretending to be someone they are not, just to gain acceptance from the world around them. They hide their real feelings. They silence their true personality. They abandon their dreams. They live according to expectations that do not even belong to them. And slowly, without realizing it, they become emotionally disconnected from their own soul. Many people are physically alive but spiritually lost. They wake up every morning following routines that make them feel empty inside. They smile while carrying hidden sadness. They constantly say, "I'm fine," while feeling mentally exhausted every single day. And one of the biggest reasons this happens is because they have spent too much of their life trying to become acceptable to others instead of becoming honest with themselves. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins when you become disconnected from your true nature. The more you betray yourself to gain approval, the more inner conflict you create. Your soul knows when you are living dishonestly. Your mind knows when you are suppressing your truth. And even if the entire world accepts the fake version of you, deep inside, you still feel empty because your real self remains hidden. This is why so many people secretly feel lost, even when everything looks successful from the outside. They may have approval, attention, money, relationships, or status, but internally they feel disconnected because they built their entire life around pleasing others instead of understanding themselves. Many people are not living anymore. They are performing. Every conversation becomes performance. Every decision becomes performance. Every social interaction becomes performance. They constantly monitor themselves, wondering, how should I act? What will people think? How do I avoid judgment? How do I stay accepted? And over time this becomes emotionally exhausting, because the human soul was never meant to live as a prisoner of constant approval. The truth is, no matter how hard you try, you will never fully control how people see you. Some people will misunderstand you even when your intentions are pure. Some people will judge you without knowing your struggles. Some people will dislike you simply because you are different. And if your peace depends on everybody understanding and accepting you, your mind will remain trapped forever. This is why Buddhism teaches detachment, not because human connection is wrong, but because attachment to validation destroys inner freedom. The moment your identity depends on approval from others, you stop living authentically. You begin shaping your entire life around fear instead of truth. And fear slowly destroys the soul. Fear keeps people silent when they want to speak honestly. Fear keeps people trapped in toxic relationships. Fear keeps people hiding their real personality. Fear keeps people living small lives, even when their heart wants something bigger. Fear keeps people emotionally imprisoned for years. Many people never become who they truly are because they are too afraid of disappointing others. They fear criticism from family. They fear rejection from society. They fear losing people. So instead of listening to themselves, they continue living according to expectations that slowly destroy their peace. But Buddhism reminds us of something powerful. You did not come into this world to become a copy of everybody else's expectations. You came here to experience life consciously and honestly. You came here to discover who you truly are beneath all the pressure, fear, approval-seeking, and emotional attachment. You came here to live. Yet many people postpone living until it is too late. They tell themselves, one day I will finally be myself. One day I will follow my dreams. One day I will stop caring what people think. One day I will choose peace. But life continues moving. Days become years. Years disappear quietly. And suddenly people realize they spent most of their existence emotionally trapped inside fear of judgment. This is one of the saddest ways to live, because time is something you can never recover once it disappears. Buddhism constantly teaches awareness of impermanence because most people live as though life will last forever. They assume there will always be more time, more opportunities, more chances to finally become honest with themselves. But nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. Another year is not guaranteed. Even another moment is not guaranteed. And once you truly understand this deeply, your entire perspective on life begins to change. You stop wasting energy trying to impress everybody. You stop constantly explaining yourself. You stop shrinking your personality to fit into places where your soul feels trapped. You stop sacrificing your peace for temporary approval. Because suddenly, authenticity becomes more important than acceptance. Many people spend years trying to avoid rejection, but they never realize something painful. While trying so hard not to be rejected by others, they rejected themselves first. They abandoned their own truth. They ignored their own emotional needs. They silenced their own inner voice. They became strangers to themselves. And no amount of approval can heal the emptiness created by self-abandonment. This is why authentic living is so important. Authenticity is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming honest. Honest about your feelings. Honest about your needs. Honest about what truly brings peace into your life. Honest about what destroys your spirit. Honest about the life you actually want to live. Many people are terrified of authenticity Because authenticity often requires change. It may require setting boundaries. It may require disappointing people. It may require walking away from toxic environments. It may require choosing solitude for a while. It may require rebuilding your identity completely. And that process can feel uncomfortable. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to comfort is also a source of suffering. Growth often feels uncomfortable because you are releasing old versions of yourself that were built around fear and approval seeking. The person you become after choosing authenticity is very different from the person you were while constantly living for others. You become calmer. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop seeking validation everywhere. You stop feeling desperate to be accepted. You stop emotionally chasing people who do not value you. You become more peaceful because your life finally begins aligning with your inner truth instead of external pressure. And slowly, you begin experiencing a type of freedom that most people never reach. The freedom of no longer pretending. The freedom of no longer constantly performing. The freedom of no longer needing everybody's approval to feel worthy. That freedom changes everything. Because when you stop living for approval, your energy changes completely. Your mind becomes lighter. Your emotions become more stable. Your relationships become more honest. Your decisions become clearer. And for the first time in a long time, you finally begin feeling connected to yourself again. Buddhism teaches that true peace does not come from controlling the outside world. It comes from understanding yourself deeply and letting go of attachment to things that destroy your inner balance. And one of the biggest things that destroys inner balance is living dishonestly. Pretending destroys peace. Suppressing yourself destroys peace. Constant approval seeking destroys peace. Trying to become everything for everyone destroys peace. This is why so many people feel emotionally exhausted, even when they are doing everything correctly. They followed the expectations. They pleased people. They avoided conflict. They tried to fit in. Yet internally, they still feel empty because the soul cannot feel peaceful while living disconnected from truth. Your soul wants honesty. Your soul wants freedom. Your soul wants peace. And sometimes peace only begins the moment you stop trying to become who everybody else wants you to be. The truth is, not everybody will understand the real you. Some people only like the version of you that stayed small and emotionally available all the time. Some people only liked you when you constantly sacrificed yourself. Some people become uncomfortable the moment you start protecting your peace. But that is part of growth. Buddhism teaches that attachment to being understood by everyone creates suffering. Not everybody is capable of understanding your journey. Not everybody is meant to walk beside you forever. And that is okay. You do not need universal approval to live authentically. You only need honesty with yourself. At the end of life, nobody regrets being too authentic. Nobody regrets protecting their peace. Nobody regrets becoming honest with themselves. But many people regret wasting years living according to fear instead of truth. Many people regret not expressing themselves honestly. Many people regret ignoring their dreams. Many people regret caring too much about opinions that ultimately meant nothing. And many people regret abandoning themselves for acceptance that never truly fulfilled them anyway. That is why Buddhism constantly reminds us to wake up before life disappears. Wake up before years pass by in emotional fear. Wake up before you lose yourself completely. Wake up before you spend your entire life performing for people who were never truly living your reality. Because one day, your life will end. And before that moment arrives, make sure you truly lived as yourself. Speak honestly, protect your peace, follow what feels true to your soul, Stop shrinking yourself for acceptance. Stop apologizing for your growth. Stop sacrificing your mental health trying to make everyone comfortable. Choose authenticity over performance. Choose peace over approval. Choose truth over fear. Because your soul only gets one life, and that life is too precious to waste pretending to be someone you are not. 8. Stop abandoning yourself to keep everyone else comfortable. One of the saddest things that can happen in life is slowly losing yourself while trying to keep everybody else happy. It does not happen all at once. It happens little by little. You stay quiet when something hurts you. You ignore your own feelings to avoid conflict. You say yes when your heart wants to say no. You tolerate disrespect because you are afraid of losing people. And over time, you become so focused on protecting everybody else's comfort that you completely forget about your own peace. Many people live like this every single day. They wake up emotionally exhausted because their entire life revolves around keeping others satisfied. They constantly worry about disappointing people, upsetting people, or being judged by people. So instead of speaking honestly, they suppress themselves. Instead of protecting their peace, they sacrifice it. Instead of living authentically, they perform for acceptance. And slowly, this creates deep emotional emptiness. Buddhism teaches that suffering often begins the moment you become disconnected from yourself. The more you abandon your own truth to gain approval from others, the more inner conflict grows inside you. Your soul knows when you are living dishonestly. Your mind knows when you are forcing yourself to tolerate things that are destroying your peace. Even if you smile on the outside, internally you feel heavy because you are constantly betraying your own needs. This is why many people feel tired even when they are doing nothing physically difficult. Their exhaustion is emotional. Their mind is carrying too much pressure, too much fear, too much self-suppression. They are trying so hard to become what everybody else wants that they no longer know who they truly are anymore. Many people become experts at understanding everybody else while completely ignoring themselves. They know how to comfort others. They know how to support others. They know how to avoid conflict. They know how to keep relationships alive. But they do not know how to protect their own peace. They do not know how to choose themselves without guilt. And they do not know how to stop abandoning themselves for temporary approval. Buddhism teaches awareness, and awareness means honestly recognizing what is destroying your inner peace. Sometimes the biggest source of suffering is not life itself. Sometimes it is the constant habit of ignoring your own emotional needs just to make everybody else comfortable. Many people are afraid to be honest because honesty sometimes changes relationships. The moment you start setting boundaries, speaking your truth, or protecting your peace, some people become uncomfortable. Not because you became a bad person, but because they were attached to the version of you that always sacrificed itself for them. Some people only feel comfortable around you when you constantly say yes. Some people only appreciate you when you ignore your own needs. Some people only like you when you remain emotionally available all the time, while asking for nothing in return. But the moment you finally begin valuing yourself, everything changes. Suddenly, people call you distant. They call you selfish. They call you different. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to approval creates suffering. If your entire life is built around making sure nobody ever becomes uncomfortable with your choices, you will spend your whole existence emotionally imprisoned by fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, fear of losing people, and fear slowly destroys the soul. This is why so many people feel emotionally trapped. Deep inside, they know they are unhappy. They know certain relationships drain them. They know certain environments destroy their peace. They know they are constantly abandoning themselves, but they continue tolerating it because they are afraid of what might happen if they finally choose themselves. But choosing yourself is not selfish. Destroying yourself to maintain approval is what truly becomes unhealthy. Buddhism teaches balance and compassion, but compassion should also include yourself. Many people show endless compassion to others while treating themselves with neglect. They constantly give love, patience, understanding and emotional energy to everybody around them, while silently allowing their own mental health to collapse. Eventually, this creates resentment and exhaustion, because no human being can continuously pour energy into others while completely abandoning themselves. The truth is, your peace matters too. Your emotions matter too. Your mental health matters too. Your life matters too. And if you spend your entire existence acting as though everybody else's comfort is more important than your own well-being, you will eventually feel invisible inside your own life. Many people become so attached to being needed that they forget how to simply exist peacefully on their own. They constantly overgive because they believe their value comes from how much they sacrifice for others. They believe love must be earned through self-neglect. They believe they must always carry everyone emotionally to deserve acceptance. But Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering, and attachment to being needed can become another emotional prison, because eventually you stop helping others out of genuine compassion and start helping out of fear. Fear that people will leave. Fear that people will stop loving you. Fear that you will become unimportant if you stop sacrificing yourself. This creates relationships built on emotional exhaustion instead of inner peace. And many people stay trapped in these patterns for years. They continue tolerating disrespect. They continue ignoring red flags. They continue emotionally draining themselves. They continue staying silent about their pain, because deep inside they are terrified of losing connection. But Buddhism teaches that peace cannot exist where self-betrayal continues. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly abandoning yourself. You cannot heal while continuously placing everybody else's needs above your own mental health. And you cannot feel emotionally free while living as a prisoner of approval. This is why boundaries are so important. Boundaries are not hatred. Boundaries are not cruelty. Boundaries are self-respect. Boundaries are awareness. Boundaries are understanding that your soul deserves protection too. Many people think peace means keeping everybody happy all the time. But real peace often requires difficult decisions. Sometimes peace requires saying no. Sometimes peace requires distance. Sometimes peace requires walking away from relationships, conversations, habits, and environments that constantly drain your energy. And yes, some people may become upset. Some people may misunderstand you. Some people may accuse you of changing. But growth always changes people. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Life constantly changes. People change. Relationships change. You are not meant to stay the exact same person forever, just to make everybody else comfortable. Some versions of you were built entirely around survival, fear, and approval seeking. But healing requires transformation. And transformation often makes people uncomfortable. Many people want you to grow, but only in ways that continue benefiting them. They want you to heal, but not if your healing creates boundaries. They want you to become stronger, but not if your strength means you stop tolerating disrespect. They want your peace, but only if it remains convenient for them. This is why learning to stop abandoning yourself is so powerful. Because once you finally begin respecting your own peace, your entire life changes. Your mind becomes calmer. Your emotions become clearer. You stop feeling emotionally desperate for approval. You stop over-explaining yourself constantly. You stop chasing acceptance from people who do not value your soul. And for the first time in a long time, you begin feeling emotionally connected to yourself again. That connection is powerful, because when you reconnect with yourself, you stop living on autopilot. You stop automatically sacrificing your happiness to keep everybody comfortable. You become more aware of what drains your spirit and what brings you peace. And slowly, you realize something important. You were never born to spend your whole life emotionally abandoning yourself for other people. You were born to live consciously. You were born to experience peace. You were born to understand yourself deeply. You were born to live authentically before life ends. Many people reach later stages of life carrying deep regret because they spent too much time living for others. They spent decades trying to become acceptable instead of becoming honest. They ignored their dreams. They silenced their voice. They tolerated emotional pain for too long. And eventually, they realized they never truly lived as themselves. That realization is heartbreaking, because time cannot be recovered. This is why Buddhism constantly reminds us to wake up before life disappears. Wake up before years pass by in emotional exhaustion. Wake up before self-neglect becomes your identity. Wake up before you completely lose yourself trying to keep everybody else comfortable. Because your soul deserves peace too. Your mind deserves rest too. Your life deserves honesty too. And one of the most powerful things you can ever do is finally stop abandoning yourself just to gain temporary approval from people who may never truly understand your worth anyway. You do not need to destroy yourself to deserve love. You do not need to constantly suffer to prove your value. You do not need to sacrifice your peace to keep everybody happy. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to walk away from what destroys your soul. You are allowed to live honestly. And the moment you finally stop abandoning yourself, your healing truly begins. 9. One day you will realize nobody can live your life for you. One day, you will wake up and realize something deeply painful and deeply freeing at the same time. Nobody can live your life for you. Nobody can feel your hidden sadness the way you feel it. Nobody can fully understand the silent battles happening inside your mind. Nobody can truly carry your emotional pain, your regrets, your fears, your dreams, or your inner emptiness. People may give advice. People may judge you. People may tell you how to live. But at the end of the day, you are the one who must wake up every morning and live inside your own mind. And this is why Buddhism teaches the importance of self-awareness and inner truth. Many people spend most of their life following paths they never truly chose for themselves. They live according to society's expectations, family pressure, fear of judgment, or emotional attachment to approval. They become so focused on being accepted by others that they completely lose connection with themselves. Slowly, their life stops feeling real. They continue smiling, working, talking, and surviving, but deep inside, they feel emotionally disconnected because they are living according to what everyone else expects, instead of what their soul truly needs. This is why so many people secretly feel empty, even when their life looks successful from the outside. They achieved what people told them to achieve. They followed the rules. They became responsible. They tried to make everybody proud. But internally, they still feel lost because they built their life around external approval instead of inner peace. Buddhism teaches that attachment to external validation creates suffering because your happiness becomes controlled by something unstable. Other people's opinions constantly change. Society constantly changes. Expectations constantly change. And if your identity depends entirely on those things, your peace becomes fragile. One compliment makes you feel worthy. One criticism makes you feel broken. One rejection makes you question your value. One disappointment destroys your confidence. And over time, this creates a person who no longer knows how to live freely. Many people become emotionally addicted to approval without even realizing it. Every decision becomes connected to what other people might think. They constantly monitor themselves, trying to avoid criticism, avoid conflict, avoid rejection, and avoid disappointing others. But in the process, they slowly disappoint themselves. This is the tragedy of living for approval. You begin abandoning your own truth, little by little, until one day you barely recognize yourself anymore. Buddhism teaches that awareness is the beginning of freedom. And awareness means honestly seeing how much of your life is being controlled by fear instead of truth. Fear keeps people silent when they need to speak honestly. Fear keeps people trapped in unhealthy relationships. Fear keeps people emotionally attached to situations that destroy their peace. Fear keeps people pretending to be okay while suffering internally. Fear keeps people from becoming who they truly are. And the saddest part is that many people spend years trapped inside these patterns because they are waiting for permission to finally choose themselves. But nobody is coming to live your life for you. Nobody can heal your inner emptiness for you. Nobody can create peace inside your mind for you. Nobody can become your true self for you. That responsibility belongs to you. And once you truly understand this, your entire perspective begins to change. You stop waiting for everybody to approve your choices. You stop constantly asking the world for permission to exist authentically. You stop shaping your personality around what feels acceptable to others. Because you finally realize something important. This life is yours, not society's, not strangers, not people who judge you without understanding your struggles, not people who only support you when you abandon yourself for their comfort. Your life belongs to you. And Buddhism teaches that life is temporary. One day, your time here will end. Your body will disappear. Your opportunities will disappear. Your youth will disappear. And in the end, the opinions that once controlled your entire mind will mean absolutely nothing. What will matter is whether you truly lived. Not whether everybody approved of you, not whether everybody understood you, not whether everybody stayed happy with your choices, but whether you honestly lived according to your own truth. Many people never ask themselves what they truly want because they are too busy trying to become what everybody else expects them to be. They become disconnected from their own soul. They stop listening to themselves. They stop trusting themselves. And eventually, they begin living on autopilot. Wake up, go to work, please people, suppress emotions, stay quiet, repeat. Years pass this way, and suddenly people realize they spent most of their existence surviving instead of truly living. This is why Buddhism teaches mindfulness and awareness, because most people are physically alive but mentally absent from their own life. Their mind is constantly trapped in fear, pressure, comparison, regret, or approval-seeking. Very few people actually sit quietly and ask themselves, what truly brings peace into my life? What kind of life do I genuinely want? What parts of myself have I abandoned? What am I tolerating that is destroying my spirit? Why am I constantly sacrificing my happiness for temporary approval? These questions are uncomfortable. But awareness always begins with honesty, and honesty changes everything. Once you become honest with yourself, you begin noticing how many things in your life were built around fear instead of truth. You notice how often you stay silent to avoid judgment. You notice how often you ignore your needs to keep people comfortable. You notice how often you pretend to be okay while feeling emotionally exhausted. You notice how much energy you waste trying to gain approval from people who may never fully understand you anyway. And slowly, You begin realizing that you cannot continue living this way forever without losing yourself completely. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering, and one of the deepest attachments many people carry is attachment to acceptance. They want everybody to understand them, everybody to support them, everybody to approve of them. But this desire becomes emotional imprisonment because universal approval does not exist. No matter who you are, somebody will misunderstand you, somebody will judge you unfairly, somebody will criticize your decisions, somebody will dislike your growth. And if your peace depends on avoiding all criticism, you will spend your entire life trapped inside fear. This is why inner peace is so important. A peaceful person understands that they cannot control everybody's opinions. They stop wasting energy trying to manage how the world sees them. Instead, they focus on living honestly and consciously. They stop performing. They stop pretending. They stop emotionally chasing acceptance. And because of this, their mind becomes lighter. Many people think freedom means having money, status, or success. But Buddhism teaches that real freedom begins inside the mind. A person controlled by approval is not free. A person controlled by fear of judgment is not free. A person constantly abandoning themselves for acceptance is not free. Real freedom begins when you stop needing everybody else's permission to become yourself. That freedom changes your entire life. You stop apologizing for your boundaries. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop tolerating relationships that constantly destroy your peace. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside environments where your soul feels trapped. And slowly, you begin reconnecting with yourself again. That reconnection is powerful because many people have spent so long performing for others that they no longer know who they really are. They know who people expect them to be. But they do not know themselves. They do not know what genuinely makes them happy. They do not know what peace feels like anymore. They do not know how to exist without constantly seeking approval. And this creates deep emotional exhaustion, because the soul becomes tired of pretending. The soul becomes tired of living dishonestly. The soul becomes tired of carrying emotional pressure that was never meant to belong to it. This is why so many people secretly feel empty, even when surrounded by people. Because external connection cannot heal internal disconnection from yourself. You can receive attention and still feel lonely. You can receive praise and still feel empty. You can receive approval and still feel disconnected from your own soul. Because true peace does not come from being accepted by everyone else. It comes from finally accepting yourself. Buddhism teaches compassion, but real compassion must also include yourself. Many people spend years giving understanding, patience, and emotional support to everyone around them while completely neglecting their own mental health. They become emotionally available for everybody except themselves. And eventually, this creates burnout, resentment, and emptiness, because no human being can continuously abandon themselves without emotional consequences. This is why you must eventually stop waiting for the world to save you. Nobody can create inner peace for you. Nobody can heal your relationship with yourself for you. Nobody can choose authenticity for you. Nobody can live honestly for you. That responsibility belongs to you. And while that truth may feel heavy at first, it is also incredibly freeing. Because the moment you stop waiting for permission, your life begins changing. You begin choosing peace over approval. You begin protecting your energy instead of constantly sacrificing it. You begin sacrificing it. You begin listening to your inner truth instead of everybody else's expectations. You begin realizing that your soul deserves honesty too. And slowly, your life starts feeling real again. Buddhism constantly reminds us that life is temporary. One day, everything will disappear, your body will age, your time will end. And when that final moment comes, the only thing that will truly matter is whether you had the courage to live authentically while you still had the chance. Not whether everybody liked you, not whether everybody approved of your choices, not whether you perfectly satisfied every expectation placed upon you, but whether you truly lived, whether you listened to your soul, whether you protected your peace, whether you became honest with yourself before time ran out. Many people reach the later stages of life carrying deep regret because they spent too much time living according to fear instead of truth. They regret not speaking honestly. They regret not following their heart. They regret wasting years trying to become acceptable instead of authentic. They regret abandoning themselves for people who eventually disappeared anyway. And that regret becomes painful, because life cannot be repeated. This moment will never come again. This version of you will never exist again. This day will never return again. So stop waiting for everybody to finally understand you before you choose yourself. Stop waiting for universal approval before you protect your peace. Stop sacrificing your soul trying to satisfy people who are not living your life. Because one day, you will realize nobody can live your life for you. And before that day comes, make sure you stop abandoning yourself and finally start living honestly, consciously, and peacefully while you still can. 10. The day you stop needing everyone's approval is the day you finally become free. Most people are not truly living freely. They are emotionally controlled by opinions, expectations, judgment, and fear. Every decision they make is influenced by what somebody else might think about them. They constantly worry about being accepted, understood, liked, praised, or approved by the people around them. And because of this, they never fully relax. Their mind is always under pressure. Even when they are alone, they are mentally carrying the weight of other people's expectations. This is one of the biggest reasons so many people feel emotionally exhausted today. Their life is no longer guided by inner peace or self-awareness. It is guided by approval-seeking. Everything becomes connected to validation. Social validation, family validation, relationship validation, public validation, and slowly the human mind becomes trapped in a constant cycle of emotional dependence. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering. And one of the deepest attachments many people carry is attachment to approval. They become attached to being liked by everyone. They become attached to protecting their image. They become attached to avoiding criticism at all costs. But the problem is simple. The moment your happiness depends on everybody approving of you, your peace becomes unstable. One compliment can make you feel valuable. One criticism can destroy your confidence. One rejection can make you question your entire worth. And over time, this creates emotional weakness, because your identity becomes controlled by external opinions instead of inner truth. Many people spend their entire life trying to become acceptable instead of authentic. They hide parts of their personality. They suppress their emotions. They silence their opinions. They abandon their dreams. They change themselves depending on who they are around, and eventually they become disconnected from who they truly are. This is why so many people secretly feel empty, even while surrounded by people. Because deep inside, they know they are performing instead of living honestly. Buddhism teaches that real peace begins the moment you stop searching for yourself inside the opinions of others. No human being can give you permanent inner peace, because other people's perceptions constantly change. Someone may praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. Someone may support you for years and suddenly walk away. If your identity depends entirely on external validation, your emotional state will constantly rise and fall based on things you cannot fully control. This is emotional imprisonment. Many people become prisoners of approval without realizing it. They constantly overthink how they look, how they sound, how they are perceived, and whether people are happy with them. Their mind never rests because they are always trying to manage other people's opinions. But Buddhism teaches awareness. And awareness means recognizing that no matter how hard you try, you will never fully control how everybody sees you. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people will judge you unfairly. Some people will dislike you for reasons that have nothing to do with you. Some people will criticize your growth simply because your healing makes them uncomfortable. And if you spend your entire life trying to avoid all judgment, you will never feel free. This is why freedom begins internally. Real freedom is not simply having money, status, or power. Real freedom is reaching a point where your peace no longer depends on everybody approving of your existence. That kind of freedom changes everything. Because when you stop emotionally depending on approval, your mind becomes calmer. You stop feeling desperate to explain yourself. You stop needing constant reassurance. You stop shrinking yourself to fit into places where your soul feels trapped. And slowly, you begin living honestly again. Many people do not realize how much of their life is controlled by fear until they finally become self-aware. Fear controls what they say. Fear controls their choices. Fear controls their relationships. Fear controls their personality. They are constantly afraid of rejection, abandonment, criticism, or disappointing others. And because of this fear, they continue sacrificing themselves. They say yes when they want to say no. They tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. They remain in relationships that emotionally drain them. They hide their real thoughts and feelings. They continue performing for acceptance even when their soul feels exhausted. This is why Buddhism teaches detachment. Detachment does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means freeing yourself from unhealthy emotional dependence on things outside your control. You cannot control everybody's opinions. You cannot control who misunderstands you. You cannot control who chooses to judge you. But you can control whether you continue sacrificing your peace, trying to gain universal approval. And that choice changes your life. Many people think approval will finally make them feel complete. They believe that if enough people love them, praise them, or accept them, they will finally feel worthy inside. But the truth is, no amount of external validation can permanently heal internal disconnection from yourself. You can receive praise and still feel empty. You can receive attention and still feel lonely. You can receive approval and still secretly hate your life. Because peace does not come from everybody loving you. Peace comes from finally accepting yourself without constantly needing permission from the world. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on self-awareness and inner understanding. The more connected you become to yourself, the less controlled you become by external opinions. You begin realizing that your worth does not increase because someone praises you, and your worth does not disappear because someone criticizes you. You stop allowing temporary opinions to define your identity. That emotional independence is powerful, because once you stop depending on approval, you stop living in fear all the time. You stop fearing rejection so deeply. You stop fearing judgment so deeply. You stop fearing disappointment so deeply. And for the first time in a long time, you begin breathing emotionally again. Many people are emotionally suffocating because they are constantly trying to maintain an image instead of living authentically. They feel pressure to appear successful, strong, perfect, attractive, intelligent, or emotionally stable all the time. They become exhausted because they are carrying identities that were built entirely around social acceptance. But the soul becomes tired of pretending. Very tired. Eventually, something inside begins to break, because no human being can spend their whole life performing without emotional consequences. This is why so many people feel anxious, even during peaceful moments. Their nervous system is constantly under pressure because their identity depends too heavily on external reactions. Their mind becomes addicted to validation, reassurance, and approval. And addiction always creates suffering. Buddhism teaches that attachment leads to suffering because attached people lose inner stability. Their emotional state becomes dependent on conditions outside themselves. If people approve of them, they feel okay. If people reject them, they feel worthless. If people praise them, they feel confident. If people criticize them, they feel broken. This creates emotional instability because the mind is constantly reacting to external opinions. But inner peace begins when you stop giving everybody else control over your emotional state. That does not mean criticism will never hurt. It does not mean rejection becomes painless. It simply means your entire identity no longer collapses every time someone disagrees with you. And that emotional strength changes your life completely. Because when you stop needing approval everywhere, you finally begin making decisions based on truth instead of fear. You begin protecting your peace. You begin setting boundaries. You begin speaking honestly. You begin choosing relationships that genuinely support your soul instead of relationships built on performance and self-sacrifice. And slowly, your life begins feeling lighter. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything changes. People change. Opinions change. Relationships change. Life itself changes constantly. So why spend your entire existence desperately trying to control how everybody sees you? Why spend years emotionally exhausting yourself trying to maintain approval that can disappear at any moment? Many people lose themselves chasing acceptance from people who are also lost themselves. They spend years trying to satisfy society while ignoring their own soul. They become so distracted by external pressure that they completely forget the deeper purpose of life. Life was not meant to become endless emotional performance. Life was meant to be experienced consciously, peacefully, honestly. But honesty requires courage. It takes courage to become yourself in a world that constantly pressures people to conform. It takes courage to disappoint others when necessary. It takes courage to protect your peace instead of sacrificing it for approval. It takes courage to stop pretending. And many people avoid authenticity because authenticity often changes relationships. The moment you stop people-pleasing, some people become uncomfortable. The moment you stop over-explaining yourself, some people call you distant. The moment you stop abandoning yourself, some people accuse you of changing. But growth always changes people. Buddhism teaches that attachment to old identities creates suffering. Some people are attached to old versions of you because those versions were easier to control, easier to manipulate, or easier to benefit from emotionally. But healing requires transformation. And transformation often disappoints people who only loved the version of you that ignored its own needs. This is why you must eventually stop choosing approval over peace. Because peace matters more. Your mental health matters more. Your soul matters more. And one of the most powerful moments in life is when you finally realize this. You do not need everybody to approve of you to deserve peace. You do not need universal acceptance to live authentically. You do not need constant validation to be valuable. Your worth already exists even when people misunderstand you. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins when attachment ends, and one of the deepest forms of freedom is emotional freedom from constant approval seeking. That freedom allows you to finally live honestly, to finally breathe deeply, to finally stop performing, to finally stop chasing validation everywhere, and to finally reconnect with yourself again. Many people wait their entire life to feel free, never realizing that freedom was never outside them. Freedom begins the moment you stop giving everybody else control over your identity. Freedom begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself for acceptance. Freedom begins the moment you stop fearing judgment more than losing yourself. And freedom begins the day you finally understand that your peace is far more valuable than temporary approval from a world that will never stay satisfied forever. Because at the end of life, people's opinions will disappear. Judgment will disappear. Approval will disappear. But the relationship you had with yourself will remain the most important relationship of all. So stop living like a prisoner of everybody else's expectations. Stop shrinking your soul for acceptance. Stop sacrificing your truth for approval. And finally allow yourself to live freely, honestly, peacefully, and authentically before life ends. 11. Stop waiting for the perfect moment to finally live your life. One of the biggest lies people tell themselves is this: one day I will finally start living. One day I will stop worrying so much. One day I will follow my dreams. One day I will choose myself. One day I will stop caring what people think. One day I will finally feel peace. But Buddhism teaches something deeply important. Life is happening now, not later, not someday in the future, not after everybody approves of you, not after everything becomes perfect. Life is happening in this very moment. And the more you postpone truly living, the more your life quietly disappears while you are busy waiting. Many people spend years trapped in emotional hesitation. They delay happiness because they are afraid of judgment. They delay authenticity because they are afraid of rejection. They delay peace because they believe they must first satisfy everyone else before finally giving themselves permission to live honestly. But the truth is painful. That perfect moment may never come. Life will never become completely free from problems. People will never completely stop judging you. Society will never suddenly give you permission to fully become yourself. If you keep waiting for perfect conditions before choosing peace, authenticity, and emotional freedom, you may spend your entire life waiting. And this is exactly what happens to so many people. Years pass quietly. Opportunities disappear. Energy changes. Youth fades. And one day people suddenly realize they spent most of their existence preparing to live instead of actually living. Buddhism constantly reminds us about impermanence because everything in life changes. Nothing remains forever. Your current age will disappear. Your current stage of life will disappear. Even the people around you will eventually disappear. Yet despite this reality, many people continue living as though they have unlimited time. They postpone joy. They postpone healing. They postpone honesty. They postpone rest. They postpone their dreams. And while they keep postponing life, life itself keeps moving forward without waiting for them. This is why so many people secretly feel regret inside. Deep down, they know they are not truly living according to their soul. They know they are emotionally trapped by fear, pressure, expectations, and constant approval seeking. But instead of changing, they continue delaying their own freedom because they are afraid of discomfort. Fear keeps people emotionally frozen. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of disappointing others, fear of being misunderstood, and slowly, fear becomes the prison that controls their entire life. Buddhism teaches that attachment to fear creates suffering because fear disconnects you from the present moment. Instead of fully experiencing life, your mind becomes trapped inside endless worries about the future and endless attachment to other people's opinions. This is why many people no longer feel alive. Their body exists, but their spirit feels trapped. Their mind is constantly overthinking. Their emotions are constantly exhausted. Their soul feels disconnected because they are not living honestly anymore. Many people wake up every morning already carrying emotional pressure before the day even begins. They immediately start thinking about responsibilities, expectations, stress, comparison, and what everyone else expects from them. Very few people stop and ask themselves one simple question: what kind of life do I truly want to live before I die? That question changes everything. Because when you become aware of death, your perspective on life changes completely. Suddenly, small opinions matter less. Petty judgment matters less. People-pleasing matters less. Pretending matters less. And authenticity becomes more important. Buddhism teaches awareness of death not to create fear, but to create clarity. When you understand deeply that your time is limited, you stop wasting energy on things that destroy your peace. You stop delaying your happiness for some day that may never come. You stop sacrificing your entire life trying to gain approval from people who are also struggling with their own fears and insecurities. And you finally begin realizing how precious your existence truly is. Many people live emotionally asleep. They repeat the same exhausting cycles every day, without questioning whether those cycles are slowly destroying their spirit. They continue tolerating relationships that drain them. They continue hiding their true personality. They continue suppressing their emotions. They continue choosing safety over truth because they are afraid of stepping outside the expectations placed upon them. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to comfort can also create suffering. Comfort zones often become emotional prisons. Many people stay trapped in familiar pain because unfamiliar freedom feels terrifying. They remain in situations that destroy their happiness simply because change feels uncertain. But life itself is uncertainty. Nothing is guaranteed. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. More time is not guaranteed. Another opportunity is not guaranteed. And once you truly understand this, your priorities begin changing. You stop asking, "What will people think?" And you start asking, "What kind of life am I actually creating for myself?" That question is powerful because it forces honesty. Many people are not creating lives that bring them peace. They are creating lives built around approval, fear, pressure, and emotional survival. They are constantly performing for the world while silently neglecting themselves. Eventually, this creates emotional emptiness because the soul becomes tired of waiting. The soul becomes tired of pretending. The soul becomes tired of postponing its own happiness. And deep inside, many people know this. They know they are not fully alive anymore. They know they abandoned parts of themselves years ago. They know they are emotionally exhausted from constantly trying to meet expectations that never end. But they continue waiting for the right time to finally choose themselves. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is all you truly have. The past already disappeared. The future is uncertain. Yet most people sacrifice the present moment because their mind is constantly trapped somewhere else. They replay old mistakes. They worry about future problems. They obsess over what others think. And because of this, they never fully experience life while it is happening. This is one of the greatest tragedies of human existence. People spend their entire life mentally absent from their own life. Even during beautiful moments, their mind is somewhere else. Even while surrounded by opportunities, they remain trapped inside fear. Even while alive, they forget how to truly live. This is why Buddhism places so much importance on mindfulness and awareness. Awareness brings you back to reality. Awareness reminds you that life is temporary. Awareness reminds you that no amount of approval will ever feel more important than inner peace when your life finally ends. At the end of life, people rarely regret not pleasing enough people. They regret not living honestly. They regret not expressing themselves. They regret wasting years worrying about opinions that no longer matter. They regret postponing happiness. They regret ignoring their soul. And perhaps one of the deepest regrets of all is realizing they spent too much time emotionally surviving and not enough time truly living. Many people are waiting for confidence before taking action, but confidence often comes after action, not before it. Many people are waiting for fear to disappear before changing their life. But fear may never fully disappear. Many people are waiting for everybody to understand them before choosing authenticity. But not everybody will understand them. And this is why waiting becomes dangerous. Because waiting slowly turns into years. And years eventually turn into regret. Buddhism teaches detachment from external approval because external approval constantly changes. If you keep waiting for universal acceptance before becoming yourself, you may never experience freedom at all. True freedom begins the moment you stop delaying your own life. The moment you stop saying, "one day," and start saying, "now." Now I will protect my peace. Now I will stop abandoning myself. Now I will stop pretending. Now I will stop sacrificing my happiness for approval. Now I will begin listening to my soul. That shift changes everything. Because the moment you stop waiting for perfect conditions, life begins opening differently. Your decisions become more honest. Your relationships become more authentic. Your mind becomes calmer because you are no longer constantly betraying yourself. And slowly, you begin reconnecting with the present moment again. You begin noticing small things again. You begin feeling emotionally alive again. You begin experiencing peace in simple moments instead of constantly postponing happiness for the future. This is one of the greatest lessons Buddhism teaches. Peace is not hiding somewhere in the future. Peace begins inside the way you live today. Not someday, not after everybody accepts you, not after life becomes perfect. Today. Many people believe they need to achieve something massive before finally giving themselves permission to feel happy. But happiness is not always found in achievement. Sometimes happiness begins the moment you stop mentally fighting yourself every single day. Sometimes happiness begins when you stop comparing yourself. Sometimes happiness begins when you stop chasing approval. Sometimes happiness begins when you finally allow yourself to exist without constant pressure. And sometimes happiness begins the moment you stop waiting to live. Because the truth is, your life is already happening, right now. This moment matters. This breath matters. This day matters. And one day, all of this will disappear. That is why Buddhism teaches gratitude and awareness. Not because life is always easy, but because life itself is temporary. Every moment is fragile. Every experience is temporary. And once a moment passes, it never returns again. You will never get this exact day back. You will never get this exact version of yourself back. You will never get this exact moment back. So stop postponing your peace. Stop delaying your authenticity. Stop sacrificing your happiness waiting for the perfect conditions that may never arrive. Stop abandoning yourself because of fear. And stop wasting your precious life trying to become acceptable to everybody while forgetting to truly live for yourself. Because one day, your life will end. And before that day comes, make sure you did more than simply survive. Make sure you truly lived. Make sure you spoke honestly. Make sure you protected your peace. Make sure you followed your soul instead of fear. Make sure you stopped waiting long enough to finally experience your own life while you still had the chance. 12. Your soul becomes free the moment you stop trying to be everything for everyone. One of the biggest reasons people feel emotionally exhausted today is because they are constantly trying to be everything for everyone around them. They try to make everybody happy. They try to solve everybody's problems. They try to meet every expectation, avoid every conflict, fix every relationship, and carry everyone emotionally while silently neglecting themselves. And after years of doing this, something inside them begins to break. Their body may still continue functioning, but their spirit feels tired, very tired. Buddhism teaches that suffering often begins when attachment becomes too heavy. And one of the heaviest attachments many people carry is the attachment to being needed, accepted, approved, and emotionally responsible for everyone around them. Many people secretly believe their worth depends on how much they sacrifice for others. They believe they must always be available, always understanding, always giving, always strong, always helpful. And because of this belief, they slowly abandon their own emotional well-being, trying to maintain relationships, expectations, and approval from the world around them. But no human being can continuously carry everybody else without eventually collapsing internally. This is why so many people feel emotionally empty, even while surrounded by others. They spend so much energy taking care of everyone else that they completely lose connection with themselves. Their own peace becomes the last thing they care about. Their own emotional needs become invisible. Their own soul becomes neglected. And eventually, life begins to feel emotionally heavy all the time. Many people wake up already exhausted before the day even begins, because their mind never rests. They are constantly thinking about other people's feelings, opinions, expectations, disappointments, and reactions. Even when they are physically alone, mentally they are carrying the emotional weight of everybody around them. This is emotional overload, and Buddhism teaches that the mind suffers deeply when it becomes attached to things it cannot fully control. You cannot control everybody's emotions. You cannot constantly save everyone. You cannot fix every person. You cannot become everything for everyone. And the moment you finally understand this, your life begins changing. Many people confuse self-destruction with kindness. They believe constantly sacrificing themselves makes them loving people. But true compassion should never require you to abandon your own peace completely. True compassion includes awareness, balance, and self-respect. Buddhism teaches the middle path because extremes create suffering. Constantly neglecting yourself for others is another extreme. It may look loving on the outside, but internally, it slowly destroys your emotional stability. This is why so many kind people secretly feel deeply exhausted. They became emotionally available for everyone except themselves. They spent years understanding everybody else while ignoring their own inner pain. And eventually, resentment begins growing quietly inside them. Not because they hate people, but because their soul is tired of being abandoned. Many people do not even realize how disconnected they have become from themselves. They are so focused on maintaining relationships and approval that they no longer ask themselves simple but important questions. What do I actually need emotionally? What truly brings peace into my life? What is draining my spirit every day? Why do I feel guilty for choosing myself? These questions matter deeply because awareness is the beginning of healing. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because most people are living unconsciously. They automatically repeat emotional patterns without realizing how much suffering those patterns create. They constantly overgive, over-explain, over-sacrifice, and overextend themselves because they are afraid of rejection, judgment, or disappointing others. And over time, they become emotionally trapped inside these habits. Many people become addicted to being needed. Their identity becomes connected to helping, fixing, and saving everyone around them. They feel valuable only when people depend on them, so they continue sacrificing themselves, because deep inside they fear that if they stop overgiving, they will stop being loved. But this creates unhealthy attachment, because love built entirely on self-neglect is not peaceful love. It is emotional survival. Buddhism teaches detachment not because love is wrong, but because attachment creates suffering when your identity becomes dependent on external validation. If your worth depends entirely on being useful to others, then every rejection, every criticism, and every moment of disconnection will emotionally destroy you. And this is exactly what happens to many people. The moment someone pulls away from them, they panic. The moment someone becomes disappointed in them, they feel guilty. The moment someone criticizes them, they question their value, because they built their entire identity around external approval instead of inner peace. But your soul was never meant to live this way. You were not born to become emotionally enslaved by everybody else's expectations. You were not born to spend your entire existence carrying emotional pressure that slowly destroys your mental health. You were not born to constantly abandon yourself just to keep everyone else comfortable. Buddhism teaches that real peace begins when attachment loosens. And one powerful form of attachment is the need to always be everything for everyone. The truth is painful but freeing. You cannot save everybody. Some people do not want healing. Some people will continue choosing chaos. Some people will continue misunderstanding you, no matter how much you explain yourself. Some people will continue taking from you without appreciating your energy. And if you keep trying to carry everybody, you will eventually lose yourself completely. This is why boundaries are necessary. Not because you hate people, but because your soul deserves protection too. Many people think boundaries are selfish because they were taught to constantly prioritize others. But Buddhism teaches awareness, and awareness means recognizing when your compassion has become self-destruction. There is a difference between helping people and emotionally drowning yourself trying to rescue everyone around you. There is a difference between kindness and self-neglect. There is a difference between love and emotional exhaustion, and many people only realize this after years of burnout. One day they suddenly notice how emotionally drained they feel. They notice how much anxiety they carry. They notice how disconnected they feel from life. They notice how exhausted they are from constantly managing everybody else's emotions while neglecting their own peace. And deep inside, they realize something painful. They spent too much time trying to become everything for everyone else, and not enough time becoming themselves. This realization changes people, because eventually the soul becomes tired of constantly performing emotional labor for everybody else. The soul becomes tired of pretending it is okay all the time. The soul becomes tired of being emotionally available while receiving very little peace in return. And once this awareness begins, transformation follows. Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything changes constantly. Relationships change, people change, life changes. And when you deeply understand this, you stop trying to desperately control everybody's feelings and reactions. You begin focusing more on inner peace. You begin protecting your energy. You begin understanding that your life is limited and your emotional strength is valuable. Many people waste years emotionally draining themselves over people who eventually disappear anyway. They sacrifice their peace for temporary relationships, temporary approval, and temporary validation. But when those things disappear, they are left emotionally broken because they neglected their relationship with themselves the entire time. This is why self-connection matters deeply. A person disconnected from themselves will constantly seek external approval to fill inner emptiness. But no amount of attention can permanently heal self-abandonment. No amount of praise can permanently heal inner disconnection. No amount of approval can replace inner peace. This is why Buddhism teaches that peace must be cultivated within. External things constantly change, but inner awareness creates stability. And one of the most powerful forms of inner stability is finally realizing this. You do not need to become everything for everyone to deserve love. You do not need to constantly suffer to prove your value. You do not need to sacrifice your mental health to maintain acceptance. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to protect your peace. You are allowed to stop carrying emotional burdens that are destroying your spirit. This realization feels uncomfortable at first because many people were conditioned to feel guilty whenever they choose themselves. They were taught that self-sacrifice equals goodness. So the moment they finally begin setting boundaries, they feel selfish. But Buddhism teaches awareness over conditioning. Just because you were taught something does not mean it is healthy. Constant self-neglect is not peace. Constant emotional exhaustion is not peace. Constantly abandoning yourself is not peace. Real peace begins when your life becomes balanced again. When your compassion includes yourself too. When your kindness no longer destroys your soul. When your relationships no longer require constant self-betrayal. And when your identity no longer depends entirely on being needed by everybody around you. This is emotional freedom. And emotional freedom changes everything. Because the moment you stop trying to become everything for everyone, your mind finally begins relaxing again. You stop carrying unnecessary emotional pressure. You stop constantly fixing everybody. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop feeling responsible for emotions that do not belong to you. And slowly, you reconnect with yourself again. That reconnection is healing, because many people have spent years emotionally abandoning themselves without even realizing it. They became so focused on others that they forgot their own soul needed attention too. But your soul matters. Your peace matters. Your emotional well-being matters. And one day, you will realize something deeply important. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly abandoning yourself for people who would never sacrifice themselves the same way for you. This truth may feel painful at first, but it is also freeing, because once you accept this reality, you stop chasing impossible expectations. You stop trying to carry the entire world emotionally. You stop losing yourself inside relationships that constantly drain your spirit. And for the first time in a long time, you begin breathing emotionally again. Buddhism teaches that freedom begins when attachment loosens. And one of the greatest forms of freedom is no longer needing to be everything for everyone. That freedom allows you to finally live honestly, to finally rest mentally, to finally choose peace over endless emotional pressure, to finally stop performing for approval, and to finally reconnect with your own soul before life ends. Because your life is temporary too. Your energy is temporary too. Your time is temporary too. And before this life disappears, make sure you stop abandoning yourself, trying to save everybody else, while forgetting to save your own peace first. 13. The more you chase approval, the more you lose yourself. One of the most dangerous things a person can lose in life is not money, success, relationships, or status. The most dangerous thing a person can lose is themselves. And sadly, many people lose themselves slowly without even realizing it, because they spend their entire life chasing approval from others. They want everybody to like them. They want everybody to accept them. They want everybody to understand them. So they constantly adjust themselves depending on who they are around. They change their personality to avoid rejection. They stay silent to avoid criticism. They tolerate disrespect to avoid conflict. They suppress their emotions just to remain accepted. And little by little, they disappear inside the expectations of everybody else. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering. And one of the deepest attachments many people carry is attachment to validation. They become emotionally dependent on praise, approval, attention, and acceptance. Their self-worth becomes connected to how other people see them, instead of how deeply connected they are to themselves. This creates emotional instability because external approval constantly changes. People's opinions change, relationships change, society changes, attention changes. And if your peace depends on unstable things, your inner world will constantly feel unstable too. This is why so many people secretly feel emotionally exhausted all the time. Their mind never rests because they are constantly trying to manage how everybody sees them. Every conversation becomes emotional pressure. Every decision becomes fear of judgment. Every mistake becomes a threat to their self-worth. They become trapped inside endless overthinking. What if people dislike me? What if I disappoint them? What if they judge me? What if they reject me? And slowly, life becomes less about living and more about emotional survival. Buddhism teaches awareness because awareness allows you to finally see what is truly controlling your mind. Many people believe they are free, but emotionally they are prisoners of approval. Their choices are controlled by fear. Their personality is controlled by fear. Their relationships are controlled by fear. Fear of not being accepted. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing people. Fear of standing alone. And because of this fear, they abandon themselves repeatedly. Many people no longer know who they truly are because they spent too many years becoming what everybody else wanted them to be. They know how to fit in. They know how to please people. They know how to avoid conflict. But they no longer know what genuinely brings peace into their own soul. This creates deep inner emptiness. Because the soul becomes tired of pretending. The soul becomes tired of performing. The soul becomes tired of constantly changing itself just to gain temporary approval. And eventually, many people reach a point where they feel emotionally disconnected from their own life. They smile while feeling empty. They socialize while feeling lonely. They receive attention while secretly feeling unseen. Because approval cannot replace authenticity. No matter how much validation you receive, if you are constantly abandoning your true self to gain it, you will still feel disconnected inside. This is one of the deepest lessons Buddhism teaches. Inner peace does not come from becoming acceptable to everyone else. Inner peace comes from finally becoming honest with yourself. Many people spend years trying to create a perfect image instead of building a peaceful mind. They care more about appearances than emotional truth. They become obsessed with looking successful, strong, confident, attractive, or emotionally stable because they fear judgment from others. But maintaining false identities is exhausting, very exhausting, because the mind constantly feels pressure to protect an image that does not fully represent reality. This is why many people feel anxious even during quiet moments. Their nervous system is constantly under stress because they are always trying to maintain approval. They fear making mistakes. They fear looking weak. They fear disappointing people. They fear not being enough. And over time, this pressure slowly destroys emotional freedom. Buddhism teaches detachment because attachment to image creates suffering. The moment your identity becomes dependent on external validation, your emotional state becomes fragile. You stop living honestly because your main focus becomes protecting approval instead of protecting peace. This is why some people lose themselves completely inside relationships. They become so afraid of losing connection that they abandon their own personality, needs, and boundaries. They tolerate emotional pain just to avoid rejection. They become whoever the other person wants them to become because deep inside they believe being accepted matters more than being authentic. But this creates emotional imprisonment, because relationships built on self-abandonment never create real peace. Many people do this not only in relationships, but in every part of life. They become different versions of themselves depending on who they are around. Around family, they hide parts of themselves. Around society, they pretend to fit in. Around friends, they suppress certain emotions. Around strangers, they perform confidence they do not actually feel. Eventually, they become emotionally fragmented because they no longer know which version of themselves is real. This is one of the painful consequences of approval addiction. You stop living naturally. You stop speaking honestly. You stop expressing yourself freely. And instead of living from truth, you begin living from fear. Fear becomes the foundation of your identity. But Buddhism teaches that fear itself is often created by attachment. The more attached you become to being liked, accepted, and approved, the more terrified you become of rejection and criticism. And this fear controls your life. Many people never follow their dreams because they fear judgment. Many people never leave toxic situations because they fear disappointing others. Many people never speak honestly because they fear rejection. Many people never become themselves because they fear standing alone. And while they continue fearing, life quietly passes by. This is why Buddhism constantly reminds us of impermanence. Life is temporary. Your time is temporary. Every moment disappears quickly, yet many people spend their entire existence emotionally imprisoned by opinions that will not matter at the end of life. One day the people you are trying so hard to impress will disappear. One day the opinions controlling your mind will disappear. One day your body itself will disappear. And when that moment comes, the only thing that will truly matter is whether you honestly lived as yourself or spent your entire life performing for acceptance. This realization changes everything. Because once you deeply understand how temporary life is, you stop wasting so much energy trying to become acceptable to everybody. You begin valuing peace more than image. You begin valuing authenticity more than approval. You begin valuing truth more than performance. And slowly, emotional freedom begins growing inside you. Many people believe approval will finally make them feel complete. But approval is temporary. Somebody may praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. If your self-worth depends entirely on external reactions, your emotional state will constantly rise and fall based on things outside your control. This is emotional suffering. Buddhism teaches that true stability must come from within. A peaceful person no longer depends completely on external validation to feel worthy. They understand that opinions are temporary and subjective. They stop giving everybody the power to define their value. And because of this, they become emotionally lighter. They stop over-explaining themselves constantly. They stop desperately trying to be understood by everyone. They stop emotionally chasing approval. And slowly, they reconnect with themselves again. That reconnection is powerful, because many people have spent so long trying to become lovable to others that they forgot how to love themselves honestly. They became emotionally dependent on validation because internally they felt disconnected from their own worth. But Buddhism teaches that peace begins when you stop searching outside yourself for what can only be created within. No amount of praise can permanently replace self-acceptance. No amount of approval can permanently replace inner peace. No amount of attention can permanently heal self-abandonment. This is why authentic living matters so deeply. Authenticity allows the soul to finally relax. You stop pretending. You stop performing. You stop constantly monitoring yourself. And for the first time in a long time, your mind feels lighter, because you are no longer carrying the exhausting pressure of becoming everything for everyone. Many people do not realize how much emotional energy they waste every day trying to maintain approval. They constantly replay conversations in their mind. They overthink how they looked, sounded, or behaved. They become emotionally exhausted because they are always worried about perception instead of presence. This disconnects them from life itself, because instead of fully experiencing the present moment, they are constantly trapped inside self-consciousness and fear. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because mindfulness reconnects you to reality. It reminds you that life is happening now, not inside everybody else's opinions, not inside endless overthinking, not inside constant performance. Now. And when you truly become present, many things lose their power over you. Judgment loses power, approval loses power, fear loses power, because you begin realizing that your peace matters more than constantly managing how the world sees you. This does not mean criticism will never hurt. It does not mean rejection becomes easy overnight. It simply means your entire identity no longer collapses every time someone disapproves of you. That emotional independence is freedom. Real freedom. The freedom to speak honestly. The freedom to choose yourself. The freedom to protect your peace. The freedom to stop abandoning your soul for temporary acceptance. And many people never experience this freedom because they spend their entire life trying to become enough for everybody else while secretly feeling not enough inside themselves. But Buddhism teaches that your worth does not increase because people praise you, and your worth does not disappear because somebody misunderstands you. Your value already exists beyond temporary opinions. The moment you truly understand this, your entire life changes. You stop chasing approval everywhere. You stop shrinking yourself to fit inside expectations that destroy your peace. You stop fearing judgment more than losing yourself. And for the first time in a long time, you begin feeling emotionally alive again, because your soul no longer feels trapped inside performance. Your soul no longer feels controlled by constant approval seeking. Your soul finally begins breathing freely again. And perhaps that is one of the greatest forms of peace a human being can ever experience. The peace of finally becoming yourself without constantly asking the world for permission first. 14. One day, you will understand that peace is more important than being liked. Most people spend their entire life trying to be liked. They want everyone to approve of them, understand them, accept them, and speak positively about them. So they constantly adjust themselves to fit other people's expectations. They stay quiet to avoid conflict. They hide their true emotions to avoid judgment. They tolerate disrespect to avoid losing relationships. And little by little, they slowly sacrifice their peace just to remain accepted by the people around them. But Buddhism teaches something deeply powerful. Peace is more valuable than approval. And the moment you truly understand this, your entire life begins to change. Many people are mentally exhausted because they care too much about being liked. Every opinion affects them emotionally. Every criticism stays inside their mind for days. Every rejection makes them question their worth. Their happiness constantly rises and falls depending on how other people react to them. This creates emotional instability because external approval is temporary and unpredictable. People change constantly. Opinions change constantly. Relationships change constantly. And if your emotional state depends entirely on those unstable things, your inner world will never feel peaceful. This is why so many people secretly feel anxious all the time. Their mind is constantly trying to manage how they are perceived by others. Even during quiet moments, They replay conversations in their head. They overthink what they said, how they sounded, whether someone misunderstood them, whether somebody is upset with them, or whether people still like them. And after years of this, the mind becomes exhausted, very exhausted, because human beings were never meant to live under constant emotional pressure, trying to maintain approval from everybody around them. Buddhism teaches awareness because awareness allows you to finally recognize what is stealing your peace. Many people believe their suffering comes from life itself, but often the deeper problem is attachment to validation. They are emotionally attached to being accepted, praised and liked. And because of this attachment, they become emotionally controlled by external reactions. One compliment improves their mood. One negative opinion ruins their entire day. One rejection makes them feel worthless. One disagreement creates anxiety. This is not peace. This is emotional dependence. And emotional dependence slowly destroys inner freedom. Many people spend their whole life trying to avoid criticism because they believe criticism means they are not good enough. But Buddhism teaches that suffering grows when you attach your identity to other people's opinions. The truth is, no matter who you are, somebody will judge you. Even kind people are judged. Even peaceful people are misunderstood. Even honest people are criticized. You could spend your entire life trying to satisfy everyone, and there would still be people who dislike you, misunderstand you, or speak negatively about you. So why destroy your peace trying to control something you can never fully control? This realization is deeply freeing. Because the moment you stop expecting universal approval, you stop emotionally chasing something impossible, and slowly your mind begins relaxing again. Many people are not living according to their truth anymore. They are living according to fear. Fear controls their personality, decisions, relationships, and emotional state. They are afraid of rejection, afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing others, afraid of standing alone, and afraid of being misunderstood. So instead of choosing peace, they choose performance. They become versions of themselves that feel safer to the world. But the soul becomes tired of pretending. It becomes tired of constantly hiding its truth. It becomes tired of sacrificing peace for acceptance, and eventually, people begin feeling emotionally disconnected from themselves because they spent too many years prioritizing approval over authenticity. Buddhism teaches that attachment creates suffering, and one painful attachment many people carry is attachment to image. They become obsessed with how people see them. They want to appear perfect, strong, successful, kind, calm, intelligent, or emotionally stable all the time. They fear making mistakes because they believe mistakes will damage how others perceive them. But trying to maintain a perfect image is exhausting, because perfection does not exist. Human beings are imperfect by nature. Everyone struggles. Everyone feels pain. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone experiences fear, sadness, confusion, and emotional difficulty. Yet many people continue pretending to be emotionally perfect because they fear losing approval. This creates deep inner pressure. The mind never rests because it constantly feels responsible for protecting an image instead of protecting inner peace. And slowly, life begins feeling emotionally heavy. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because mindfulness reconnects you to reality. Reality is simple. You are human. You do not need to perform perfection to deserve peace. You do not need everybody to like you to have value. You do not need constant validation to be worthy. Your worth already exists beyond temporary opinions. Many people cannot understand this because they spent their whole life connecting self-worth to approval. Since childhood, they learned that praise meant value and criticism meant failure, so they became emotionally addicted to validation. They constantly seek reassurance from the world because internally they feel disconnected from themselves. But no amount of external approval can permanently heal internal self-rejection. This is why some people receive endless praise and still feel empty inside. Because peace does not come from everybody loving you. Peace comes from finally accepting yourself without constantly needing permission from others. This changes everything. Because once you stop emotionally depending on approval, you begin living differently. You stop over-explaining yourself constantly. You stop feeling desperate to be understood by everyone. You stop sacrificing your peace to avoid disappointing people. You stop tolerating disrespect just to remain accepted. And for the first time in a long time, your life begins feeling emotionally honest again. Many people are afraid of being disliked because they confuse rejection with worthlessness. But Buddhism teaches detachment from external reactions because external reactions are temporary and subjective. Someone's inability to understand you does not define your value. Someone criticizing your growth does not make your growth wrong. Many people become uncomfortable when you start protecting your peace because they were benefiting from your lack of boundaries. They were comfortable with the version of you that constantly sacrificed itself, the version that stayed quiet, the version that tolerated emotional pain, the version that always prioritized everyone else. But growth changes people. Healing changes people. Peace changes people. And not everyone will feel comfortable with your transformation. This is why Buddhism teaches non-attachment. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly trying to keep everybody emotionally satisfied with your choices. Some people will misunderstand you no matter how honestly you explain yourself. Some people will dislike you simply because your boundaries no longer allow them to control your energy. And that is okay. Because your purpose in life is not to become universally liked. Your purpose is to live consciously and peacefully before life ends. Many people forget how temporary life truly is. They spend years emotionally suffering over opinions that will not matter at the end of life. They waste energy trying to impress people who are also struggling with their own fears and insecurities. They carry emotional pressure every single day because they are terrified of criticism and rejection. But Buddhism constantly reminds us of impermanence. Everything changes. Opinions change. Relationships change. People disappear. Life disappears. And once you deeply understand how temporary everything is, your priorities begin changing too. You stop obsessing over what people think. You stop emotionally chasing validation everywhere. You stop needing everybody to approve of your existence. Because suddenly, peace becomes more important. Inner calm becomes more important. Authenticity becomes more important. And you finally realize how much emotional energy you wasted trying to be liked by everyone. Many people are deeply loved yet still unhappy because they never learned how to create peace within themselves. They became dependent on external reassurance instead of building inner stability. So even when people praise them, they still feel anxious because their emotional foundation is fragile. Buddhism teaches that true stability must come from within. A peaceful person does not become emotionally destroyed every time somebody criticizes them. Their identity is no longer completely controlled by external opinions. This does not mean criticism never hurts. It simply means they stop allowing temporary reactions to define their entire self-worth. That emotional freedom is powerful, because once you stop needing universal approval, you finally begin breathing emotionally again. You begin speaking more honestly. You begin protecting your peace. You begin choosing authenticity over performance. You begin realizing that life is too short to spend every day mentally imprisoned by fear of judgment. Many people are waiting for everyone to finally understand them before they choose themselves. But not everyone will understand your journey. Not everyone will support your healing. Not everyone will appreciate your boundaries. And if you keep waiting for universal acceptance before protecting your peace, you may spend your entire life emotionally trapped. This is why inner peace matters more than being liked, because peace stays with you. Approval comes and goes, praise comes and goes, opinions come and go, but your relationship with yourself follows you everywhere. And if you continuously sacrifice that relationship, trying to become acceptable to everybody else, eventually you will feel emotionally lost, no matter how many people approve of you. Buddhism teaches that suffering decreases the moment attachment decreases. And one of the most freeing things a human being can release is the constant need to be liked by everyone. Because once that attachment weakens, your life changes completely. You stop shrinking yourself. You stop pretending. You stop emotionally performing. You stop constantly seeking reassurance from the outside world. And slowly, your soul begins relaxing again. That relaxation feels like freedom. The freedom to exist honestly, the freedom to protect your energy, the freedom to disappoint people when necessary, the freedom to stop abandoning yourself. And perhaps most importantly, the freedom to finally live your life according to peace instead of fear. Because at the end of life, people's opinions will not matter. Being universally liked will not matter. Perfectly maintaining your image will not matter. What will matter is whether you truly lived honestly while you still had the chance. Whether you protected your peace. Whether you stopped betraying yourself for approval. Whether you allowed yourself to become authentic before your time disappeared. And one day, you will finally realize something deeply important. Peace is far more valuable than being liked by everyone around you. And the moment you truly understand that, your soul finally begins to feel free. 15. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of life without ever truly being yourself. One of the saddest things that can happen to a human being is not failure, rejection, poverty, or criticism. The greatest tragedy is reaching the end of life and realizing you never truly lived as yourself. Realizing you spent most of your existence hiding your truth, suppressing your emotions, abandoning your dreams, and shaping your entire identity around what other people expected from you. Many people never realize this until years have already disappeared. They spend decades trying to become acceptable instead of authentic. They become so focused on pleasing others that they slowly lose connection with their own soul. Every decision becomes based on approval. Every action becomes fear of judgment. Every relationship becomes emotional performance. And little by little, they stop living honestly. Buddhism teaches that suffering begins when you become disconnected from your true nature. The more you betray yourself to gain acceptance from the world, the heavier your spirit becomes. Your mind may continue functioning, but internally something always feels incomplete, because your soul knows when you are living dishonestly. This is why so many people secretly feel emotionally exhausted, even when their life looks successful from the outside. They may have money, relationships, attention, or social approval, but deep inside they feel empty because they built a life around external expectations instead of inner truth. Many people are physically alive, but spiritually disconnected. They wake up every morning already tired, not because their body lacks energy, but because their soul feels trapped. Trapped inside routines they never truly wanted. Trapped inside relationships where they cannot fully be themselves. Trapped inside fear of judgment. Trapped inside constant pressure to maintain approval. And after years of this emotional suppression, they no longer remember what genuine peace feels like. Buddhism teaches awareness Because awareness allows you to finally see how much of your life is being controlled by fear instead of truth. Many people are not making free decisions. Their choices are controlled by emotional conditioning. Since childhood, they learned to seek approval, avoid rejection, suppress emotions, and fit into expectations created by family, society, and the world around them. So instead of asking, "What feels true to my soul?" they ask, "What will people think?" And that question slowly destroys authenticity. Because the moment your life becomes controlled by fear of judgment, you stop living naturally. You begin performing for acceptance. You adjust your personality depending on who you are around. You hide parts of yourself to remain likable. You tolerate emotional pain to avoid disappointing others. And eventually, you become a stranger to yourself. This is one of the deepest forms of suffering, because no amount of external approval can replace inner self-connection. You can receive praise and still feel empty. You can receive attention and still feel lonely. You can receive validation and still secretly hate your life. Because peace does not come from everybody loving you. Peace comes from finally becoming honest with yourself. Many people spend their whole life waiting for permission to become who they truly are. They wait for society to approve. They wait for family to understand. They wait for fear to disappear. They wait for the perfect moment to finally choose themselves. But Buddhism teaches impermanence. Life does not wait forever. Time keeps moving. Days disappear quietly. Years disappear quietly. And one day people suddenly realize they spent most of their existence emotionally surviving instead of truly living. This realization becomes deeply painful later in life. Many older people carry silent regret because they know they abandoned themselves for too long. They know they cared too much about opinions that ultimately meant nothing. They know they sacrificed too much of their peace trying to satisfy people who eventually disappeared anyway. And perhaps the most painful realization of all is understanding that time cannot be recovered. You cannot relive your 20s. You cannot recover lost years of fear. You cannot go back and become honest earlier. You cannot reclaim moments that already disappeared. This is why Buddhism constantly reminds us to wake up now. Not later. Now. Because your life is happening right now. This moment matters. This breath matters. This stage of your life matters. And if you continue postponing authenticity, waiting for perfect conditions, you may eventually realize your whole life passed while you were emotionally hiding from yourself. Many people believe they have unlimited time, but life is fragile. Death is not something distant. Death is part of existence itself. Every human being will eventually face it. And when that moment finally comes, external approval will not matter anymore. The opinions that controlled your mind will disappear. The pressure to impress others will disappear. The fear of judgment will disappear. What will remain is the truth about how honestly you lived. Did you protect your peace? Did you follow your soul? Did you express your truth? Did you allow yourself to become authentic? Or did you spend most of your life emotionally imprisoned by fear of rejection? These questions matter deeply because many people do not realize how much they are sacrificing until it is too late. They sacrifice dreams for acceptance. They sacrifice honesty for approval. They sacrifice peace for relationships that drain them. They sacrifice authenticity for temporary validation. And over time, their soul becomes exhausted from constantly carrying a life that no longer feels true. Buddhism teaches non-attachment because attachment creates suffering. And one of the deepest attachments people carry is attachment to image. They become obsessed with appearing successful, perfect, liked, admired, and accepted. They fear criticism because they connected their identity to approval. But this creates emotional slavery, because the moment your self-worth depends entirely on other people's reactions, you stop living freely. You become emotionally controlled by praise and criticism. One compliment lifts your mood. One negative opinion destroys your confidence. One rejection makes you question your value. And slowly, your emotional state becomes controlled by things outside your control. This is why inner peace becomes impossible while living entirely for approval. Buddhism teaches that true peace must come from within. A peaceful person understands that opinions are temporary. They stop giving everybody the power to define their worth. They stop shaping their identity around fear of judgment. And because of this, they begin living more honestly. They stop pretending constantly. They stop emotionally performing. They stop abandoning themselves to remain accepted. And slowly, their soul begins feeling lighter. Many people are terrified of authenticity because authenticity often changes relationships. The moment you stop people-pleasing, some people become uncomfortable. The moment you start protecting your peace, some people accuse you of changing. The moment you stop tolerating disrespect, some people begin resisting your boundaries. But growth always changes relationships. Healing changes relationships. Peace changes relationships. And Buddhism teaches that attachment to old versions of yourself creates suffering too. Some people are attached to the version of you that constantly sacrificed itself, because that version was easier to control emotionally. But your soul was never meant to live in constant self-betrayal. You were not born to spend your whole life trying to become everything for everyone. You were not born to emotionally shrink yourself for acceptance. You were not born to constantly suppress your truth. You were born to live consciously before life disappears. Many people never truly experience freedom because they spend their entire existence chasing approval. They become emotionally addicted to validation because internally they feel disconnected from themselves. They constantly need reassurance from the outside world because they never built peace within. But no amount of approval can permanently heal self-rejection. No amount of praise can permanently heal self-abandonment. No amount of attention can permanently replace inner peace. This is why authentic living matters so deeply. Authenticity reconnects you to your soul. It allows your nervous system to finally relax because you stop constantly pretending. You stop carrying exhausting emotional pressure. You stop monitoring yourself every second trying to remain acceptable. And for the first time in a long time, you begin existing naturally again. That naturalness feels peaceful, because the human soul was never designed to live as a performance forever. Many people secretly feel emotionally suffocated because they built entire identities around external expectations. They no longer know who they truly are beyond the roles they perform for others. They know how to appear strong. They know how to appear successful. They know how to appear okay. But deep inside, they feel disconnected from themselves. This is why so many people experience silent sadness. They may smile publicly while privately feeling empty, because their soul knows something important is missing: truth. Real truth. Not socially acceptable truth, not performance, not image, but genuine emotional honesty. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because mindfulness reconnects you with reality. And reality is simple. Life is temporary. Your time is limited. Your soul deserves peace too. And spending your whole life emotionally trapped by fear of judgment is one of the saddest ways to exist. Many people die before they ever truly live, because they spend their entire existence waiting for permission to become themselves. But nobody can give you that permission except you. Nobody can live your life for you. Nobody can reconnect you to your soul for you. Nobody can become authentic for you. That responsibility belongs to you. And while this truth may feel heavy, it is also incredibly freeing, because the moment you stop waiting for approval, your life begins changing. You begin choosing peace over performance. You begin choosing authenticity over fear. You begin choosing truth over emotional survival. And slowly, you start feeling emotionally alive again. That aliveness is powerful, because many people have spent so long emotionally suppressing themselves that they forgot what genuine freedom feels like. Freedom to speak honestly. Freedom to protect your peace. Freedom to set boundaries. Freedom to disappoint people when necessary. Freedom to stop apologizing for your growth. Freedom to exist without constantly asking the world for permission. This is real emotional liberation. And Buddhism teaches that liberation begins internally, not through controlling the outside world, but through releasing attachment to the things that keep your soul imprisoned. And perhaps one of the biggest prisons of all is the constant need for approval, because approval can never fully satisfy the soul. Only truth can do that. Only authenticity can do that. Only inner peace can do that. This is why one of the greatest tragedies in life is reaching the end of your existence without ever truly becoming yourself, without ever fully expressing your soul, without ever giving yourself permission to live honestly, without ever freeing yourself from fear. And this is also why one of the greatest forms of wisdom is waking up before it is too late. Waking up before years disappear. Waking up before self-betrayal becomes your identity. Waking up before your soul completely forgets what peace feels like. Because one day, your life will end. And before that day comes, make sure you did more than simply survive other people's expectations. Make sure you truly lived as yourself. Make sure you protected your peace. Make sure you followed your truth. Make sure you stopped abandoning your soul for temporary approval. And make sure you finally allowed yourself to become free while you still had the chance. 16. The moment you choose yourself, your entire life begins to change. There comes a moment in life when a person becomes completely exhausted from constantly living for everybody else. Exhausted from trying to meet endless expectations. Exhausted from constantly worrying about opinions, approval, rejection and judgment. Exhausted from sacrificing their peace just to keep everyone around them comfortable. And eventually, something inside begins to wake up. A quiet realization appears in the mind. I cannot continue living like this anymore. This moment changes everything. Because for the first time, a person begins understanding that constantly abandoning themselves is not peace. Constantly suppressing emotions is not peace. Constantly pretending to be someone else for approval is not peace. Real peace begins the moment you finally choose yourself. Buddhism teaches that suffering often begins when we become disconnected from our true nature. The more we ignore our inner truth to satisfy external expectations, the heavier life begins to feel. Your soul knows when you are betraying yourself. Even if you smile publicly, even if people praise you, even if the world accepts you, internally your spirit still feels exhausted, because deep inside you know you are not living honestly. This is why so many people secretly feel emotionally empty. Their entire life revolves around pleasing others, but nobody taught them how to truly care for themselves emotionally. They learned how to avoid conflict. They learned how to gain approval. They learned how to become useful, helpful, and emotionally available for everyone around them. But they never learned how to protect their own peace. So they spent years carrying emotional pressure that slowly destroys their spirit. Many people wake up every morning already mentally tired because their mind never rests. Even during quiet moments, they are thinking about everybody else's expectations, reactions, opinions, and emotional needs. Their nervous system becomes overwhelmed because they are constantly emotionally performing for the world, and after years of this, they begin losing themselves completely. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because mindfulness reconnects you to yourself. It allows you to finally notice how much emotional suffering you are carrying unnecessarily. Many people continue living in painful cycles simply because they never stop long enough to question them. They continue tolerating disrespect. They continue suppressing their truth. They continue sacrificing their needs. They continue saying yes when their soul wants to say no. And because these habits become normal, they forget what emotional freedom even feels like. But one day, the soul becomes too tired to continue pretending. One day, the emotional exhaustion becomes impossible to ignore. One day, the desire for peace becomes stronger than the desire for approval. And that is the moment transformation begins. Many people fear choosing themselves because they were taught that prioritizing their peace is selfish. They were conditioned to believe that constantly sacrificing themselves made them good people. So whenever they try to create boundaries or protect their energy, guilt immediately appears inside them. But Buddhism teaches awareness over conditioning. Just because you were taught to neglect yourself does not mean self-neglect is healthy. You cannot build a peaceful life while constantly abandoning your own soul. You cannot heal while continuously betraying your emotions. And you cannot become emotionally free while your entire identity depends on keeping everyone else happy. This is why choosing yourself is one of the most important things a person can ever do. Choosing yourself does not mean becoming cruel. It does not mean you stop caring about others. It simply means you stop destroying yourself, trying to become everything for everyone around you. Many people are emotionally drowning because they spend too much time saving others while ignoring their own inner pain. They constantly support everybody emotionally while secretly feeling unsupported themselves. They become emotionally available for everyone except themselves. And eventually, this creates deep exhaustion. Because the human soul cannot survive peacefully while constantly being neglected. Buddhism teaches balance. Compassion should include yourself too. Many people give endless understanding, patience, love, and emotional energy to others while speaking harshly to themselves internally. They allow everybody else to rest while never allowing themselves peace. This imbalance creates suffering, and suffering continues until awareness appears. Awareness changes everything because awareness forces honesty. You begin noticing what drains your spirit. You begin noticing how much fear controls your decisions. You begin noticing how often you suppress your truth to avoid judgment. You begin noticing how much of your life revolves around approval instead of peace. And slowly, you realize something painful. You spent too much time abandoning yourself. This realization hurts, because many people suddenly see how many years disappeared while they were emotionally surviving instead of truly living. They see how often they ignored their intuition, how often they tolerated emotional pain, how often they chose acceptance over authenticity, and deep inside, regret begins growing. Not because they failed others, but because they failed themselves. Buddhism constantly reminds us that life is temporary. Every moment disappears quickly. Your youth disappears. Your energy changes. Your opportunities change. And one day, life itself ends. Yet despite this reality, many people continue postponing peace. They tell themselves, one day I will finally choose myself. One day I will stop caring what people think. One day I will live honestly. But life keeps moving, and someday quietly turns into years. This is why choosing yourself now matters so deeply. Not later, now. Because your soul deserves peace now. Your mind deserves rest now. Your life deserves honesty now. Many people are terrified of disappointing others because they confuse rejection with worthlessness. But Buddhism teaches non-attachment, because attachment to approval creates suffering. If your happiness depends entirely on everybody accepting your choices, you will spend your entire existence emotionally imprisoned by fear. Some people will not understand your growth. Some people will dislike your boundaries. Some people will become uncomfortable when you stop sacrificing yourself, and that is okay. Not everybody is meant to stay comfortable with your healing. Some people only like the version of you that constantly neglected itself. But growth changes people. Healing changes people. Peace changes people. And once you begin choosing yourself, your entire energy changes. You stop begging for validation. You stop emotionally chasing approval. You stop explaining yourself endlessly. You stop tolerating relationships that constantly destroy your peace. And slowly, you begin reconnecting with yourself again. That reconnection feels powerful, because many people spent years emotionally disconnected from their own soul. They became so focused on external acceptance that they forgot how to simply exist peacefully within themselves. But inner peace is one of the greatest forms of wealth a human being can have. A peaceful mind sleeps differently, breathes differently, lives differently. And Buddhism teaches that true peace cannot exist where constant self-betrayal continues. This is why boundaries become necessary. Boundaries are not selfishness. Boundaries are self-respect. Boundaries are awareness. Boundaries are understanding that your emotional energy is valuable. Many people never learned this. They were taught to constantly tolerate things that hurt them emotionally. So they continue carrying toxic relationships, unhealthy environments, emotional pressure, and endless expectations because they are afraid of conflict. But peace often requires difficult decisions. Sometimes peace requires distance. Sometimes peace requires honesty. Sometimes peace requires letting people misunderstand you. And sometimes peace requires walking away from environments that slowly destroy your spirit. This does not make you selfish. It makes you conscious. Buddhism teaches that attachment to suffering keeps people trapped. Many people stay emotionally attached to painful situations simply because familiarity feels safer than change. They remain inside emotional exhaustion because they fear uncertainty. But remaining emotionally trapped is not living. It is surviving. And your soul deserves more than survival. Your soul deserves freedom. Many people spend so long trying to become acceptable that they completely forget what genuine happiness feels like. They become emotionally numb. Their life becomes repetitive. Their mind becomes constantly stressed. And even when beautiful moments appear, they struggle to enjoy them because internally they are carrying too much emotional pressure. This is what happens when a person abandons themselves for too long. The soul becomes tired, very tired. But the beautiful thing about awareness is that healing can begin the moment you finally stop betraying yourself. The moment you stop living only for approval. The moment you stop apologizing for your boundaries. The moment you stop shrinking yourself to remain accepted. Everything begins changing. Your mind becomes calmer. Your emotions become clearer. Your nervous system begins relaxing. And slowly, your life starts feeling real again. Many people think choosing themselves will make them lonely. But often, constantly abandoning yourself is the loneliest experience of all. Because even while surrounded by people, you still feel disconnected inside when you are not living honestly. True connection begins with self-connection, and Buddhism teaches that awareness of the self is the beginning of liberation. Liberation from fear. Liberation from constant approval seeking. Liberation from emotional performance. Liberation from self-neglect. This liberation is powerful because it allows your soul to finally breathe. You stop carrying everybody emotionally. You stop sacrificing your peace unnecessarily. You stop needing everybody's permission to exist authentically. And for the first time in a long time, you begin living according to truth instead of fear. This is real transformation. Not becoming perfect, not becoming admired, but becoming honest. Many people spend their whole life trying to become impressive, while secretly feeling emotionally exhausted inside. But Buddhism teaches that true fulfillment comes from inner peace, not external admiration. Because admiration fades, opinions fade, attention fades, but your relationship with yourself follows you everywhere. And if that relationship is built on constant self-betrayal, no amount of external success will bring lasting peace. This is why choosing yourself changes everything. Because once you finally begin respecting your own soul, your entire perspective shifts. You stop viewing yourself as someone who must constantly earn worth through suffering. You stop believing you must destroy yourself to deserve love. You stop sacrificing your emotional well-being to maintain acceptance. And instead, you begin understanding something deeply important. Your peace matters too. Your happiness matters too. Your healing matters too. Your life matters too. And before this temporary life disappears, you deserve the chance to truly live it as yourself. Not as a performance. Not as an image. Not as somebody else's expectation. But as your real self. Free. Honest. Peaceful. And emotionally alive. 17. Stop destroying your mental health trying to be accepted by everyone. One of the most painful things many people do to themselves is sacrifice their mental health just to be accepted by others. They constantly overthink, over-explain, overgive, and emotionally exhaust themselves trying to make sure everybody likes them, understands them, and approves of them. And after years of living this way, they slowly lose their peace. Their body may still continue functioning every day, but internally their mind feels tired all the time. Even during quiet moments, they cannot fully relax because they are constantly worried about how they are being perceived by other people. This is one of the biggest forms of silent suffering, because from the outside, everything may look normal. The person still smiles, still talks, still goes to work, still fulfills responsibilities. But internally, they are emotionally overwhelmed because their mind never stops carrying pressure. Pressure to be liked, pressure to be accepted, pressure to avoid judgment, pressure to avoid disappointing others, pressure to constantly maintain approval. And Buddhism teaches that attachment to approval creates suffering because your inner peace becomes dependent on things you can never fully control. You cannot control everybody's opinions. You cannot control who misunderstands you. You cannot control who criticizes you. You cannot control who chooses to dislike you. Yet many people spend their entire life mentally fighting these realities instead of accepting them. And because of this resistance, their mind becomes exhausted, very exhausted. Many people no longer know what emotional rest feels like because their nervous system is constantly active. They replay conversations in their head. They analyze every small interaction. They worry about what people think about them. They become emotionally anxious over rejection, criticism, and misunderstanding. This creates mental suffering because the mind never feels safe enough to simply exist peacefully. Buddhism teaches mindfulness because mindfulness allows you to observe how much unnecessary emotional pressure you are carrying every day. Many people believe they are suffering because of life itself, but often the deeper problem is emotional attachment to validation. They attach their worth to approval. So every negative reaction feels like a personal attack on their identity. Every criticism feels devastating. Every rejection feels unbearable. And over time, their self-worth becomes extremely fragile because it depends too heavily on external reactions. This is why so many people feel emotionally unstable. One compliment makes them feel valuable. One negative opinion destroys their confidence. One moment of rejection ruins their entire mood, and slowly, their emotional state becomes controlled by everybody else. This is not freedom. This is emotional imprisonment. Buddhism teaches that real peace begins when you stop allowing temporary opinions to control your inner world. Opinions are unstable. Human beings constantly change their perceptions. Someone may praise you today and criticize you tomorrow. If your happiness depends entirely on other people's approval, your mind will never remain peaceful for long. Many people become addicted to validation without realizing it. They constantly seek reassurance from others because internally they feel disconnected from themselves. They need attention, praise, acceptance, and approval just to feel emotionally okay. But no amount of external validation can permanently heal internal self-rejection. This is why even successful people often feel empty inside. Even admired people often feel anxious. Even loved people often feel lonely. Because external approval cannot replace inner peace. Buddhism teaches that peace must be cultivated within. And one of the first steps toward inner peace is finally understanding that you do not need everybody to accept you in order to deserve peace. This realization changes your entire life because the moment you stop emotionally depending on universal approval, your nervous system begins relaxing. You stop trying so hard to manage everybody's emotions. You stop constantly explaining yourself. You stop emotionally shrinking yourself to avoid judgment. And slowly, your mind becomes lighter. Many people are mentally exhausted because they are carrying relationships that constantly drain them emotionally. They stay in environments where they cannot fully be themselves because they fear loneliness or rejection. They tolerate disrespect because they are afraid of conflict. They continue over-sacrificing because they fear losing connection. But Buddhism teaches that attachment to unhealthy relationships creates suffering too. Not every connection is peaceful. Not every relationship is healthy. And not everybody deserves unlimited access to your emotional energy. Many people feel guilty whenever they try to protect themselves emotionally. They were taught that constantly sacrificing themselves made them good people. So every time they create boundaries, they immediately feel selfish. But protecting your mental health is not selfish. It is necessary. You cannot continue emotionally abandoning yourself forever without consequences. Eventually, anxiety grows. Burnout grows. Emotional exhaustion grows. And one day, the mind becomes so overwhelmed that even small problems begin feeling unbearable. This is why so many people secretly feel emotionally numb today. Their nervous system has been carrying too much pressure for too long. They became so focused on surviving emotionally that they forgot how to truly enjoy life. Buddhism teaches that suffering increases when the mind constantly resists reality. And one reality many people resist is this: not everybody will like you. Not everybody will understand you. Not everybody will stay in your life forever. And trying to force universal acceptance only creates deeper suffering. Many people destroy their peace trying to become lovable to everyone. But the truth is, even if you are kind, respectful, caring, and honest, there will still be people who misunderstand you. So why sacrifice your mental health trying to achieve something impossible? This awareness is freeing, because the moment you stop chasing impossible approval, you reclaim your emotional energy. And once that energy returns to you, your life begins changing. You begin sleeping more peacefully. You begin thinking more clearly. You begin feeling emotionally lighter. You begin reconnecting with yourself instead of constantly monitoring everybody else's reactions. Many people are so disconnected from themselves that they no longer know what genuinely brings them peace. Their entire identity became built around managing external approval. They became experts at understanding everybody else while completely neglecting their own emotional needs. This creates deep inner emptiness, because the soul becomes tired of being ignored. The soul becomes tired of constantly performing. The soul becomes tired of carrying emotional pressure that was never meant to belong to it. Buddhism teaches awareness because awareness allows healing to begin. Once you honestly recognize how much emotional suffering approval-seeking creates, you begin making different choices. You stop explaining yourself endlessly to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop sacrificing your peace trying to avoid criticism. You stop emotionally begging for acceptance. And slowly, you begin choosing inner peace over external approval. This shift changes everything, because peace creates clarity. A peaceful mind makes better decisions. A peaceful mind experiences life more deeply. A peaceful mind no longer constantly lives in survival mode. Many people do not realize how much of their anxiety comes from fear of judgment. They are terrified of being disliked, criticized, or rejected, because they connected those things to personal worthlessness. But Buddhism teaches that criticism does not define your value. Rejection does not erase your worth. And misunderstanding does not make your truth invalid. These realizations create emotional freedom. Because once you stop taking every opinion personally, life becomes lighter. You stop carrying unnecessary emotional pain. You stop replaying every negative interaction endlessly. You stop allowing temporary reactions to emotionally control your entire day. And slowly, your mind begins healing. Healing is not becoming perfect. Healing is becoming emotionally honest. It is recognizing what destroys your peace and finally refusing to continue sacrificing yourself for it. Many people continue living in emotionally unhealthy patterns simply because those patterns feel familiar. They became used to overthinking, used to anxiety, used to people-pleasing, used to emotional exhaustion. So even though these patterns hurt them deeply, they continue repeating them automatically. But Buddhism teaches mindfulness precisely because unconscious patterns create suffering. Awareness interrupts suffering. Awareness creates freedom. And freedom begins when you stop allowing fear of judgment to control your life. Many people are afraid to fully become themselves because they fear rejection. But the painful truth is that constantly abandoning yourself is already a form of rejection. You rejected your own needs. You rejected your own truth. You rejected your own peace, all to remain acceptable to others. And eventually, this creates emotional burnout because the human soul cannot survive peacefully while constantly being betrayed. This is why choosing yourself matters so deeply. Choosing yourself means choosing mental peace over endless pressure. Choosing yourself means protecting your nervous system instead of constantly overwhelming it for approval. Choosing yourself means understanding that your emotional well-being matters too. And Buddhism teaches that inner peace is one of the greatest forms of wealth a human being can have. Because without peace, nothing else truly feels fulfilling. You can have success and still feel anxious. You can have relationships and still feel emotionally exhausted. You can have attention and still secretly feel empty. Because without inner peace, external things never fully satisfy the soul. This is why mental health matters deeply. Your mind is the place where you experience your entire life. And if your mind is constantly filled with fear, pressure, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion from trying to gain approval, life itself becomes painful. Many people wait too long before finally protecting their peace. They spend years emotionally suffering because they believe enduring constant stress is normal. But suffering should not become your identity. You deserve emotional rest too. You deserve honesty too. You deserve peace too. And perhaps one of the most powerful decisions a person can ever make is finally deciding, I will no longer destroy my mental health trying to become acceptable to everyone. Because the truth is, no matter how hard you try, universal approval will never exist. But peace can exist. Clarity can exist. Authenticity can exist. Freedom can exist. And that freedom begins the moment you stop giving everybody else control over your emotional well-being. The moment you stop needing everybody to validate your existence. The moment you stop shrinking yourself to avoid judgment. The moment you stop sacrificing your peace for temporary approval. And the moment you finally understand this deeply, your entire soul begins breathing differently. Calmer, lighter, freer, and finally at peace with itself. 18. The more you learn to let go, the more peace you feel inside. One of the deepest lessons Buddhism teaches is that suffering often comes from attachment. People become attached to approval, attached to relationships, attached to expectations, attached to the past, attached to control, and attached to the version of life they desperately want to keep. And because of these attachments, the human mind becomes emotionally heavy. Many people are not exhausted because life itself is impossible. They are exhausted because they are mentally holding on to too much. They are holding on to people who no longer value them. Holding on to old pain. Holding on to fear of judgment. Holding on to pressure to constantly prove themselves. Holding on to expectations that are slowly destroying their peace. And after years of carrying all this emotional weight, the soul becomes tired. Very tired. Buddhism teaches that peace begins the moment you stop trying to hold on to everything so tightly. The more attached you become to external things, the more emotionally unstable your mind becomes, because external things constantly change. People change, relationships change, opinions change, life changes. Nothing remains forever, yet many people continue fighting reality instead of accepting it. They continue emotionally chasing people who are pulling away. They continue trying to control how everybody sees them. They continue replaying old pain inside their mind every single day. They continue holding on to situations that already ended long ago. And because of this resistance, suffering continues. Many people secretly believe that if they hold on tightly enough, they can stop life from changing. But Buddhism teaches impermanence. Everything in life eventually changes, fades, disappears, or transforms. And the more you resist this truth, the more emotionally painful life becomes. This is why letting go is so important. Not because you stop caring, but because your soul deserves freedom too. Many people misunderstand letting go. They think letting go means becoming cold, emotionless, or distant. But true letting go is simply releasing unhealthy attachment. It is accepting reality instead of constantly mentally fighting against it. It means understanding that you cannot force people to stay. You cannot force everybody to understand you. You cannot force life to always go according to your plans. And you cannot force permanent stability from temporary things. This realization feels painful at first, but eventually it becomes peaceful, because the moment you stop trying to control everything, your mind begins relaxing. Many people are mentally exhausted because they are emotionally attached to things they cannot control. They obsess over opinions, relationships, outcomes, and situations endlessly. Their mind never rests, because they constantly replay problems, conversations, and fears over and over again. But Buddhism teaches mindfulness, because mindfulness brings awareness to this suffering. Awareness allows you to finally recognize how much emotional pain is being created by attachment itself. Many people are not suffering only because of what happened to them. They are suffering because they keep mentally holding on to what happened. They replay old memories every day. They reopen emotional wounds repeatedly. They continue carrying anger, regret, guilt, and sadness long after the moment already passed. And slowly, their mind becomes emotionally overwhelmed. This is why inner peace feels impossible for so many people. Their body lives in the present, but their mind remains emotionally trapped somewhere else. Some people are trapped in the past. Some are trapped in fear of the future. Some are trapped inside attachment to approval. Some are trapped inside fear of losing people. And because of these attachments, they forget how to simply exist peacefully in the present moment. Buddhism teaches that the present moment is where peace exists. But attachment constantly pulls the mind away from the present. The attached mind is always chasing, fearing, controlling, worrying, or resisting reality. And this creates endless emotional suffering. Many people hold on to relationships that already destroyed their peace because they are afraid of being alone. They continue sacrificing their mental health for people who continuously drain them emotionally. Deep inside, they know the connection is hurting them, but attachment keeps them trapped. Attachment whispers, maybe things will change, maybe if I try harder, maybe if I sacrifice more. And because of this emotional attachment, people continue abandoning themselves. But Buddhism teaches that attachment without awareness becomes suffering. Not every relationship is meant to last forever. Not every person is meant to walk beside you forever. Some people are lessons. Some people are temporary chapters. And holding on to everything only creates more pain. Many people also become deeply attached to other people's opinions. They replay criticism inside their mind for years. They constantly seek approval because they fear rejection. Their emotional state becomes dependent on external validation. This creates emotional instability because approval itself is temporary. One person praises you today. Another criticizes you tomorrow. If your peace depends entirely on external reactions, your inner world will constantly feel unstable. But Buddhism teaches detachment, because detachment creates emotional freedom. A detached mind is not emotionally numb, it is emotionally balanced. It understands that opinions come and go, people come and go, situations come and go, and because of this understanding, the mind stops clinging desperately to temporary things. This is where real peace begins. Many people spend years emotionally chasing things that were never meant to complete them. They chase validation, attention, relationships, success, social approval. And while chasing all these things, they completely lose connection with themselves. They believe, if I finally get enough approval, I will feel peaceful. If everybody accepts me, I will finally feel worthy. If this person stays, I will finally feel complete. But external things cannot permanently complete the soul, because external things constantly change. This is why Buddhism teaches that true peace must come from within. And one of the biggest obstacles to inner peace is emotional attachment. Attachment creates fear, fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of change, fear of uncertainty, and fear keeps the mind emotionally imprisoned. Many people are terrified of letting go because attachment became part of their identity. They became emotionally attached to suffering itself because suffering feels familiar. Even painful situations become difficult to leave because the mind fears uncertainty more than emotional exhaustion. But Buddhism teaches awareness of impermanence precisely because nothing in life stays the same forever. This moment will pass. This pain will pass. This version of you will pass. Everything changes. And once you truly accept this deeply, your relationship with life changes completely. You stop trying to control every outcome. You stop desperately holding on to people. You stop mentally fighting reality every day. And slowly, your soul begins relaxing again. Many people carry emotional weight that was never meant to stay inside them forever. They carry old heartbreak, old guilt, old shame, old rejection, old disappointment. And even years later, they continue emotionally reliving those experiences inside their mind. But Buddhism teaches that suffering increases when attachment continues. You cannot heal while constantly reopening old emotional wounds. You cannot experience peace while mentally living inside pain every day. And you cannot move forward while emotionally chained to what already ended. This is why letting go is healing. Letting go allows energy to return to the present moment. It allows the nervous system to finally rest. It allows the soul to stop carrying unnecessary emotional weight. Many people believe holding on proves love, loyalty, or strength. But sometimes holding on is exactly what destroys peace. Sometimes strength is finally accepting that something is no longer healthy for your soul. And that acceptance is powerful. Because acceptance creates freedom. Buddhism teaches acceptance not because life is always easy, but because resistance creates additional suffering. The more you mentally fight reality, the more exhausted your mind becomes. Many people mentally fight everything. They fight change, they fight uncertainty, they fight endings, they fight rejection, they fight criticism, they fight loneliness. And because of this constant inner resistance, their mind never experiences peace. But peace often begins with acceptance. Acceptance that life changes. Acceptance that people change. Acceptance that not everybody will stay. Acceptance that not everybody will understand you. Acceptance that some things are outside your control. This acceptance does not weaken you. It frees you. Because the moment you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, your emotional energy returns to you. And once that energy returns, your life begins changing. You stop emotionally chasing people. You stop obsessing over opinions. You stop replaying the past endlessly. You stop carrying emotional pain that no longer belongs in your present life. And slowly, your mind becomes lighter. That lightness feels peaceful. Because many people have spent years emotionally carrying things that their soul desperately wanted to release. But fear kept them attached. Fear of change, fear of loneliness, fear of uncertainty, fear of letting go. Yet Buddhism teaches that attachment itself is often the source of suffering. The attached mind cannot rest. It constantly fears loss. But the peaceful mind understands that life itself is temporary. Everything comes and goes. And because of this understanding, it learns how to appreciate life without desperately clinging to it. This is emotional freedom. Freedom from constant fear. Freedom from emotional dependence. Freedom from endless mental suffering. Many people think peace comes from controlling everything around them. But Buddhism teaches that peace actually comes from releasing the need to control everything. This changes your entire perspective on life. You stop trying to force outcomes. You stop trying to force relationships. You stop trying to force people to understand you. And instead, you begin flowing with life instead of constantly mentally fighting it. That flow creates peace. Because life becomes lighter when you stop carrying unnecessary attachment everywhere. Many people carry emotional pressure every single day because they are terrified of losing things. But the truth is, everything in life is temporary already. Your youth is temporary. Your body is temporary. Your relationships are temporary. Your circumstances are temporary. And one day, life itself ends. Buddhism teaches this not to create fear, but to create awareness. Because once you deeply understand impermanence, you stop wasting so much emotional energy clinging desperately to temporary things. You begin appreciating the present moment more deeply. You begin protecting your peace more intentionally. You begin living more honestly. And you begin letting go of emotional suffering that no longer serves your soul. This is why letting go is one of the most powerful forms of healing, not because you stop caring, but because you finally stop destroying yourself trying to hold on to everything forever. And perhaps one of the greatest forms of wisdom is realizing this. Peace begins the moment you stop clinging so tightly to things that were never meant to stay forever. Because life flows, life changes, life moves constantly, and your soul becomes free the moment you finally learn how to let go with awareness, acceptance, and peace inside your heart. At the end of life, nobody regrets not pleasing enough people. Nobody regrets not receiving enough approval from strangers. Nobody regrets not spending more time emotionally exhausting themselves trying to keep everyone happy. The real regret comes from abandoning yourself for too long, from hiding your truth, from suppressing your soul, from spending years living according to fear instead of peace. Buddhism teaches that life is temporary, fragile, and deeply uncertain. Every moment passes quickly. Every stage of life disappears. And one day, all the pressure, judgment, approval, and opinions that once controlled your mind will no longer matter at all. What will matter is whether you truly lived, whether you protected your peace, whether you chose authenticity over performance, whether you finally stopped emotionally chasing validation from the outside world and learned how to find peace within yourself instead. Most people spend their entire life trying to become acceptable to others while secretly feeling disconnected from themselves. But true freedom begins the moment you stop needing everybody's approval to feel worthy. You do not need to constantly prove yourself. You do not need to sacrifice your mental health for acceptance. You do not need to become everything for everyone around you. Your soul deserves peace too. Your life deserves honesty too. And before this temporary life comes to an end, give yourself permission to truly live as yourself, not as fear, not as pressure, not as somebody else's expectations, but as your real self. Calm, free, authentic, and finally, at peace.